Just a reminder that this is the budget. So when the Minister of Finance said that the money is in the bank, he was referring to the billion rand that we have in 2022-23. About half of it was appropriated on the budget of the Department of Cooperative Governance and the other half on the Department of Human Settlements vote. Just a note on the immediate relief grants that we have presented. These grants are categorized in terms of Schedule 7 of the Division of Revenue Act. So whilst the money is appropriated on the budget votes of the two national departments, it is not allocated in terms of the Division of Revenue Act to relevant provinces and municipalities. And what this process then provides for in Section 25 of the Division of Revenue Act is for us to then allow national departments to allocate it, and then we gazette it. So to regularize what was not in the Division of Revenue Act, but what the Division of Revenue Act provides for. So the process is set out in the slide. What's important to note is that this deals with immediate relief and the immediate nature of the response. So we do have some timelines around that. What the Division of Revenue Act also allows us to do is allows us to move money between what would be in the municipal fiscal framework, so in the municipal emergency and disaster response grants, into the provincial emergency or disaster response grants. So it does allow us the flexibility to move money between the provincial fiscal framework and the local fiscal framework and the other way around. This is just details about that these grants do have conditionalities. So the provincial and municipal disaster response grants is aligned to the requirements in the Disaster Management Act. It sets out all sorts of requirements. The one important requirement in this grant is that a municipality or province must spend the money within 6 months after the funds are transferred. This highlights that this is an immediate response. So that's what we do in this grant. In the emergency housing grants on the human settlements vote, so in the cases of the previous two grants where a disaster classification is required, in this case, there's a little bit more flexibility because it expands it to what we call a housing emergency. So what this means is if there's a housing emergency that is not necessarily classified as a disaster, we are able to access these grants to do that. Important to note in this grant, so when we get to the numbers a little later, is that this is done in tranche payments. And then the condition in the grant is that 80% of the first tranche must be spent before the second tranche is then transferred to the province or the municipality. How does this work? Like I had said, these grants already sit on the budget votes of these two national departments, and they are the national transferring officer. So a province or a municipality would make an application to the national transferring officer. This would be the Department of Human Settlements or the Department of Cooperative Governance, who then makes the application to the Treasury. So whilst this money sits on their vote, it is really to just allow them to transfer the money and us regularizing the requirements in the Division of Revenue Act. So the Treasury would then, and that's the reason why these applications come to the Treasury. It's because of the requirements in terms of the Division of Revenue Act and the constitutional requirements around how nationally raised revenue is then shared both horizontally and vertically. And once that approval is granted, the national transferring officer would then transfer in terms of the grant conditions to the relevant province and or municipality. The authority to grant approvals for funding in relation to disaster response doesn't only sit with the National Treasury. There's sufficient flexibility in the Appropriation Act, in the Division of Revenue Act, and in the PFMA that would allow accounting officers to make some shifts within their budget without Treasury approval. So this would be in cases where expenditure with the vote, the purpose of the vote, and the main division of the vote as per the Appropriation Act. It's consistent with the provisions that is set out and the objectives of the grant in terms of the Division of Revenue Act and the authority that accounting officers have in terms of Section 43 in the PFMA to move money in their budgets. The Treasury's authority to grant approvals relates to very specific provisions in the Treasury and under very specific circumstances. This includes the changes of payment schedules. I'll highlight some of the changes that we've made on that later. The allocations that needs to then be made in terms of the Division of Revenue Act, the changes in the stopping and the reallocation of funds in terms of Section 19. We have specific disaster provisions in the Division of Revenue Act. Where the accounting officer doesn't have authority in terms of Section 43 of the PFMA to make shifts in the budget, some provision is provided to allow the Treasury to do that. So this would be in the cases of where transfers have to be increased. And then in terms of Section 5 of the Appropriation Act, this would be in the relation to where classifications have changed. So this is in the cases where a reprioritization happens. That would mean reducing a transfer within a vote, or a main division of a vote, or reducing a capital expenditure within a vote to pay for goods and services. And I will show an example of what we had approved in relation to that too. So this is all the money in the system that is ready for spending and available, that has either been reprioritized by a specific department as approved by the accounting authority, or as reprioritized where they needed Treasury approval. And I'm sorry that the numbers are so small. But what's quite important is that all the approvals for reprioritization, the allocation of the emergency response grants has totaled 5.3 billion rand as at the end of July. Of that 5.3 billion rand, 674 million rand has been approved in relation to the 4 emergency housing grants, or the emergency relief grants. So this would be 674 million out of the 1 billion rand that we have in the budget has already been approved for allocation. So just let me highlight some of the different kinds of approvals that we have made. So for example, the approval that you see in the first 2 lines is a reprioritization approval, where we did 2 things actually. The Department of Human Settlements, quite early on in the disaster, so this would have been probably within a week of the disaster happening, had requested to move the payments of conditional grant transfers that they would have only made later in the month to bring that forward to allow the province to respond. So that was the first transfer, with the first approval we did was the 26th. It was over that long weekend in April that would have allowed us to move this money in the Human Settlements Development Grant. The approvals, for example, in the Department of Water and Sanitation was done in terms of Section 5 of the Appropriation Act, that was reducing a CapEx spending and converting that into goods and services for water tankering in municipalities. So we did one quite early for KZN and one recently for the Eastern Cape, and that was for 90 days. So that's a Section 5 approval that we had granted. The flood relief in small business, so that 60 million rand approval was done in terms of Section 43 of the PFMA. That would allow for an increase in transfers. It was done both in terms of Section 5 to decrease a transfer to one entity, but also to allow for, in terms of Section 43, an increase in transfers in another entity. So those are the different types of approvals that we have. The last one is where this was done with the accounting officer and the provincial treasury, is where the spending on the provincial roads maintenance grant, where this is consistent with the purpose of the vote and the purpose of the grant. So the province had then decided that they would reprioritize funds from the equitable share and from the provincial roads maintenance grant to do that. And that does not require a treasury or national treasury approval. So given that 4.6 billion rand out of the 5.3 billion rand that we have available was done out of reprioritization, some with treasury approval and some without. But I think the important one is that we already have allowed for the disbursement of the 674 million. So what is still with the treasury? We have approved the full allocations for disbursement on the provincial emergency housing grant and on the municipal disaster response grant. And as I had said earlier, the Division of Revenue Act allows us to move money between the provincial and the municipal grants. So we do have requests on the table to move money out of the municipal emergency housing grant into the provincial grant, and from the provincial disaster response grant into the municipal disaster response grant. The outstanding request that we have in relation to eThekwini is subject to this process. Unfortunately, this isn't delegated in the Treasury, and we do have to get the Minister of Finance's approval to gazette this, because we are changing the vertical division of revenue by doing this, and that process is underway. The second that the Minister of Finance has highlighted relates to unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure in terms of Section 30 of the PFMA. As the Minister said, the authority to approve and the final decision around all of this is a very different decision-making process than the one that is delegated to the National Treasury, where this is subject to a committee of cabinet that is chaired by the President. These applications are originally closed on the 10th of August. We have just extended it to the 17th of August. So we are hoping that we will get greater uptake around all of that. And where the money comes from to fund that is the 5 billion rand contingency framework that we have, the contingency reserve that we have. Unfortunately, the contingency reserve doesn't only deal with unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure. It provides for a whole range of other things that the Minister of Finance can adjust or can table an adjustments budget for. So just some notes on procurement, and what I do want to just highlight to the committee is to just please pay attention to the numbers I'm going to focus on around total payments. So this is the procurement dashboard that is available on the Treasury website. What I want to highlight out of this is just some discrepancies that we are seeing in the system that is making it difficult to reconcile, but we are working hard on fixing that. So in total, we have about 4 billion rands worth of orders in the system, and 101 million rands of payments have been made. And this is according to the instruction note that the Treasury has issued around reporting on procurement. I'm highlighting it for provinces and municipalities. So even though we had, for example, what was it, 5.2 billion rand approved for disbursement, what we're seeing in the system is that at national department and provincial department level, 670 million rands worth of orders and only 43 million rands worth of payments. And that is based on what we have in the procurement system. For municipalities, very different numbers, 29 million rands worth of orders, 3 million rands worth of payments. When we cross-reference this against some of the other expenditures that we have in the system, so when we cross-reference what is reported in the supply chain management framework versus what we have in the basic accounting systems for national and provincial departments, we see that 360 million rand has been spent. Let me just explain, because sometimes we may have some double counting here, and I didn't adjust it for that. Partly because in relation to, for example, human settlements, KZN hasn't reported, is not using the classifications that we've had in the standard charts of accounts to expense any allocations that was made in relation to disasters. So, for example, the 140 million rand that you're seeing on the slide relates to the approval of the 325 million rand on the provincial emergency housing grant. The national department transferred 140 million rand to the province. So that's the first tranche. Once the province gets to 80% spending against this 140 million, the second tranche for the balance of the funds will then be allocated. So when you look at this slightly differently, so for example, we have just over 300 million rand approved for the disbursement on the Municipal Disaster Response Grant. But what we're not seeing the National Department of Cooperative Governance reporting on this. But when we do change we kind of reconfigure the system to kind of look at where the money is, what we see is as at the end of July, the Department of Cooperative Governance transferred 228 million rand to municipalities on the Municipal Disaster Response Grant. In relation to the 65 million rand, for example, that the Department of Water and Sanitation had approved, that we'd approved for the Department of Water and Sanitation, 700,000 rand was spent, and that is at the end of July. I just want to go back to, to the small business development, 60 million rand. So This 60 million rand would have been the transfer that the department then made to the public entity who is managing the flood relief program. So it doesn't give any indication of the disbursements that the implementing agent would have then made to any of the beneficiaries. The amounts, the values, how many beneficiaries and all of that doesn't sit within the basic accounting system. This is really just showing us what the department spent on the system, and unfortunately a transfer shows as spent. So that's what we have here. And when we compare this, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is because when I showed you against the procurement, we saw that the numbers were very different. So it suggests that there's lots of underreporting in the system. Or maybe, I mean, if it wasn't underreporting, it just means that then we have underperformance. I would like to believe that what this is underreporting and not necessarily underperformance. In the same way, we have the same case for municipalities. So remember, we had, 28 million rands worth of orders on the procurement system. Municipalities are reporting to us that they have spent 153 million rand. The largest of that being in eThekwini. Honorable Chairs, this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for that presentation. It indeed, you know, the thing, Minister, of numbers and figures, it tells a story. And it also then allows the committee to zoom in into what the story is telling us. We've received, honorable members, a lot of information now in terms of where we are. We can see there is movement. We can see that the billion rand is not a pie in the sky, honorable Minister. It is there. But it's the question of how do you access that billion rand. I will hand over to my co-chairperson, the Honorable Nyambi, who will deal with the questions that will arise from the honorable members here in the meeting as well as on the virtual platform. And I'm glad that there are no members that will join us from the Northwest today.
Greetings, Minister, colleagues. I can confirm that, Minister, we have even invited the affected provinces. They are on the virtual platform. The Premier of the Eastern Cape and the rep of the other two provinces, they are connected on the virtual platform. At the end of the day, we'll also afford them an opportunity to comment about what we are discussing. Let's get to questions, honorable members. You'll do your formal introduction. Honorable Mente will be number 1, Honorable Khai number 2, Honorable Dereko number 3, Honorable Kikaba number 4, Honorable Isoma number 5. Mama, I love you. You are number 6. Then Honorable Mash. Then it will be Honorable Mangi. Honorable Mente.
Okay. Masbulele co-chairs, and good morning to everyone. I'm not going to say thank you for the presentation of the report, because it's long overdue. It now tells us that instead of all the reports we were receiving, even from yesterday, we were not supposed to receive them. We were supposed to receive a report that tells us how much is received, how much is used, and how much is required. Because as things stand, we are receiving reports of how much we want, how much is the damage, how much will it cost. Now, in a normal functional system, borrowing from your own words, Minister of Finance, and a proper functioning system, the day there was a declaration of the state of disaster, your office was supposed to do this. And immediately assist the people. But we were subjected to, no, people do not know what they are doing. Not your office taking charge as this is now a national disaster, knowing very well that we have a dysfunctional system. There is nothing normal. We didn't have any normal circumstance. But that's a thing of the past. Way forward. I want to understand right now, all these figures you have given us, that this is what is available, this is what, according to the law, should be disbursed out to the people in order for the lives of those children. Yesterday, the Minister of Social Development was telling us that they have given up on going back to school. Almost 70% of the dislocated children that are in KZN have given up on going to school because they are not in the dysfunction, in a functional family system. The way they stay in those halls and how their life is nowhere near being rebuilt into a normal functional household does not give them confidence and motivate them to go to school, because going to school for them, then coming back to not knowing what's going to happen, it does not give them joy. They would rather sit there with their parents and their siblings, try to find a way of how do we get tomorrow to be safe for us. Now, I want to understand from your office, with all these figures, do you now have your office, the provincial office, and anyone from the Department of Corporate Governance who is representing the municipalities that are affected to say, out of 3,000 households we need to build, we have quotations of the 3,000 households, they need this much money from this money that is available, and this is what must go to the people, and it must go to the people at this time, and this is what is going to happen. Because as far as things stand, I'm hearing a desktop exercise report, a report that says our system tells us this. But I get a sense that there's still no coordination as to what is it that the people on the ground require. Your office still does not have any appreciation and an idea of what is it that this money must do on the ground. You can't be giving money and not knowing what is that money for. And no one is going to tell you, because the system, you correctly diagnosed it. It's dysfunctional. It means you are the one that must now lead it, coordinate it, pay attention to the people's needs, deal with your officials and their dysfunctionality later. It's none of their business. I want to get that sense. Now you have told us the money is available. Are you in action to make sure that the money is doing something for the people? And the paper you said to the president, you can't release money without the paper. That paper, he is correct, it must come from you. That 3,000 households in KZN, people have no homes. This is what I know. And according to this, already, we have 3 different prices of the TRUs, those temporal structures. Eastern Cape has got its own price, Northwest has got its own price, KZN has got its own price. You don't regulate the price. It tells us that you sit, you look at the desktop, what numbers are punched in, you take them, and you say this is what is used, but you are nowhere in the system. The last one is, in this document and the monies that are available, I don't see Northwest. Can we get an explanation of what's happening with the Northwest? There is no Northwest here. There is KZN, there is Eastern Cape, the Northwest is 0. And that one of small business, that there is a desktop report of small business, that is this. People's businesses have been destroyed and no one. So you sit together in the cabinet meeting with the Minister of Small Business. Why are you not asking her what is happening at small business? We have money available, but we don't see what is it doing. It can't be us being told we are not sure if ever it's they are performing or it's under-reporting or what. Your office should be able to tell us the minister cannot account for the 60 million if it's released, it's not released, do they need it? Are there business people who need it or not? Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, don't forget the formal introduction for record purposes. Can you correct it, Honorable Mente?
Kuntombo Viomente, lungu le committee.
Thank you. Second is Honorable Khai.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairpersons. Greetings to the Minister, the team. Thanks for the presentation. I know Honorable Lisa doesn't like that term of thanking for the presentation. Chair, I just want to find out all the pockets of the monies that will be assessed, including some monies from the contingency fund. Are they enough to address all the consequences of the disaster? I'm raising this, Chair, because when the President was declaring the state of national disaster, he indicated that, if I quote, the Minister of Finance has said that a 1 billion is immediately available and will be approaching Parliament for the appropriation of additional resources. I asked this last time when we met as to how far is that process of approaching Parliament for additional resources. But perhaps if it's not necessary, the pockets that you're referring to, including the monies from the contingency fund, are enough, and then perhaps there's no need to approach then Parliament for appropriation for additional resources. I just want, there's a mention of the Department of Small Business Development, the 60 million rand. Yesterday, the department reported that they have reprioritized 60 million rand. 10 million is for the informal traders, and the 50 is for formal traders. And that the application will be closing today. I just want to find out from the official that was also reported whether the reason that as yet there is no report on how the monies have been spent. Isn't it because the applications are closing today? The other issue that was raised by the Department of Small Business Development was that there were 457 applications, and because they have only 60 million, and the value of the 457 million amount to 200 million rands, but they only have 60. And then they approached National Treasury to assist, and the application was declined. I just want to find out whether, with regard then to the additional funding that may come from the contingency fund, or additional resources that will go through the appropriation via Parliament, would be able then to be accessed to assist the small businesses that have not been able to be assisted. Thank you very much, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Khai. Honorable Direko.
Thank you, Honorable Co-Chairs, Ministers, Premiers, and greetings to everyone. Let me appreciate the work that has been done. However, I still feel that there's a lot that needs to be done based on the conditions that are on the ground. Minister, it's been 4 months and the people are still staying in the shelters. And those shelters, some of them conditions are not conducive for people to live in, and they also pose as a threat to cases of gender-based violence and COVID. So the pace in which we are addressing the issue of temporary residential units is really very slow. Can we please try to fast-track that process. I do understand that there's a process that municipalities need to follow in order for them to access the grant. However, we know the realities of our municipalities. Some of our municipalities do not have necessary capacity to follow the process that they need to follow. So I want to check on the Treasury side if in such cases where the municipalities are unable to follow what the process that they need to follow, is there any support provided to such municipalities in order for them to access the grant from the Treasury? Even if it means that we'll have to have the officials from Treasury based on those particular municipalities to assist them with the assessment and all necessary documentation so that our people can be able to get the services. And secondly, Minister, when you look at the AG's report, it shows that some of our municipalities are great offenders in terms of the bad spending of the public funds. So is there any measures in place from the Treasury to ensure that the money for the disaster will go to the disaster, not any other activities, for instance, like paying the salaries or paying any other thing that is not related to the disaster? Lastly, Minister, during our visit to these affected provinces, we then realized that some of the causes for this disaster is as a result of poor spatial planning, which means there's a possibility that in future, if we can have a rain like the one that we just recently had 4 months ago, we'll experience the same challenges that we are experiencing now. So in such a situation, does those municipalities get their allocation from Treasury where the conditions are, where there's a possibility of a disaster happening again? And if they are getting that allocation, is there any plan in place to ensure that you deal with the challenges that may contribute to the second disaster in such areas? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Don't worry, members, we have right people that will be taking the questions while the minister is quickly taking something outside. Honorable Kikaba.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I think at a personal level, one must appreciate this calling on this immediate relief grant, because I really, at a personal level, I didn't know how it works. You know, when you are told there's 1 billion to be spent, you think that that 1 billion would be available for use. And this process, I think in many ways, more than one, as I am sitting here, not only knowing the process, but the reality is that it might be that nationally, why there is no capacity to use this money. There is money, but there is no capacity to use it. Now, for us as politicians, now the issue is our people, up to date, 4 months after the disasters, they have still not recovered their dignity. And actually now we are told there is money. There is money for our people to recover. And I think this money is more than enough, Chair. And I think in her closing, before she just closed, she did mention that there is underperformance and there is underreporting. Now my question is, if you say to us that there is 29 million orders in KZN human settlement, but then 360 million has been spent, what does that mean in terms of the difference? Where is this other money, which is not 29 million, coming from? Is it coming from provincial coffers? And who approved it? And what does it mean using so lot of money that is not approved in terms of Treasury regulation? Because now, as a layman from the street who knows only Amandla, it tells me that about 331 million that KZN department has used, but that money, how is it going to be accounted for? And will Treasury be able to replace or to approve that money so that it goes from the provincial coffers? That's if I understood correctly. I would want to be corrected about it. But with this underperformance and this underreporting, my last question is, do we think we will be able to use the 1 billion in totality? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kikaba. Honorable Lesomo.
I will introduce myself, although you have called me Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't know, these two, even from yesterday, but nevertheless, I'm not the Chair. Chair, let's thank the opportunity. I'm Mainali Soma, a member of this committee. Chair, how I wish that all of us will start appreciating that when we sit in these meetings and engage with the executives, we are not engaging for our own entertainment. We are engaging so that we give explanation and simplify issues for our public. But also we tend to be impatient. I'm still going to repeat it in DPME, by the way, at this point. Because if that 1 billion pronounced by the president, immediately thereafter, government took time to explain to South Africans, even ourselves, notwithstanding that we might be understanding that. Hence, I will say that government must communicate in a simple terms. I know that disaster falls under COCTA, but the money, the bread gentlemen, because Usipi Song, South Africans, including DPME, if there was a center was holding in that aspect, the same approach that we employed when we're dealing with COVID, where government was clear and simple working with the South Africans and ourselves, notwithstanding in sometimes we're in recess and also under level 5 lockdown. But I'm saying that because we wouldn't have been here in our previous meetings trying to understand and comprehend this 1 billion, where is it? And different assumptions have been formed, and it will take time for us to go out from those assumptions, which are negative. That's one, Chair. Two, Chair, I think it's Comrade Mente, but I'll use my own word, Honorable Mente, that sometimes we throw money to a problem instead of fixing the problem. If the minister says that through the presentation that it's under-reporting and a challenge to spend the money, but for me, whatever has been spent, where has it been spent? Is it on the ground? Would we raising some of the issues if that money has gone where it's supposed to? But I'm happy that yesterday we got a presentation. We'll cross-check and see, and also the provinces will confirm the allocation. But the question that I want to ask, Chair, Treasury has had any effort to assist municipalities without singling out one to source the monies from claims from insurance companies? Noting that they were expected to reprioritize, notwithstanding some of them ordinarily they are unable to spend the money that is allocated to them, which means ordinarily then the common logic of finance is that if you don't spend money, next time around you get lesser because you are unable even to spend what you are supposed to be spending, let alone that you spend in a way that is not compliant with the financial protocols. Chair, in terms of social, small business, I'm directing that one to the minister. That are you aware that small business development, they are using an entity which is CEDA to transfer funds? For me, then it does raise a question that what's the role of the department? We would have just with Treasury then deal with those entities, as it were. Which will be my sort of second last, Chair. Are there any interventions to assist the affected provinces, I don't want to say municipalities, to relax some of the financial regulations so that they are able also to meet the target, i.e., human settlement in terms of the TRUs? It seems like there's a slow pace. There are people still in the community halls, which I'm worried what will happen next. Social development, equally so. They are expected to service those communities who are in the community halls, but that one is unbudgeted, unforeseen expenditure. What effort has Treasury made to assist in that space? Because at the end of the day, when the AG comes, it will be fruitless expenditure, whereas the money has been spent because we're responding to the disaster. But disaster, Chair, it can't be for more than 3 months, and there's nothing in terms of what you call it, rebuilding our communities, as it were. Regardless what explanation you give, but if then our society and our communities are very impatient with us. The last point, Chair, let me welcome the physical attendant of the minister and his team. And the teaching that we experienced yesterday, you can see the smooth communication and also engagement, as it were. And also even the spirit and the mood and the approach is positive. I think we're moving towards the right direction. Thank you so much.
Love you, Mama.
I love you too, Baba. Good morning, Co-Chair, the Minister and the team, officials, and also colleagues, honorable members. I'm just going to zoom straight to the questions, Chairperson, and we appreciate the presentation. Well, I've got 4 questions, Chairperson. The first one will be, although Honorable Dirego did touch on it, but I am going to strongly emphasize on it that has the National Treasury provided support, again, to the provinces and municipality on the process of applying funding for disasters? Point number 2, Chairperson, will be what oversight is National Treasury undertaking in terms of allocation spend of disbursed allocations in ensuring allocations are used for the said purposes, because we need to follow up, on that. My other question, Chairperson, will be on page 14 of National Treasury presentation. I just want to know, why is the Department of Water and Sanitation spending at national and provincial not reflected on this slide? I would like to have a clarity on that one. And the last question, Chairperson, Minister, what we have discovered here is municipalities, the only municipalities only report, but National Treasury does not have any monitoring and evaluation of implementation of efforts for remediation. I'll pause there, Chairperson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mama.
Sure, Bob.
Honorable Mashiho.
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe it will be wrong for us to, when we received information that seeks to change our attitude, that we can't say it. There is nothing wrong in us saying it, that we might have had a wrong understanding. We are now enlightened. For instance, when we went to KZN, Minister, we were driven to be angry because of the attitude. We wanted the mayor, we could not get one. The MEC for Cogta was dragged into the meeting. Finally, the premier came. And the premier was very bold to say he does not, he is just as angry like we are that 1 billion rand was declared and nothing is given to them. Later on in the meeting, Minister Gungubele came and said to us, but your approach that there was a 1 billion rand declared for KZN was incorrect. And I'm sure that's what you are also saying today, that the 1 billion rand was never declared for KZN, but was declared for disasters, not for KZN. So meaning, if disaster has happened in Bushbuck Ridge, the Bushbuck Ridge people will also tap into the 1 billion rand. And I think he was very consistent in wanting to mention that, Minister Gungubele. Now, you are now saying to us, in actual fact, 1 week or so after the disaster, the president asked you to do what Honorable Mente is saying you should do. Though I do not necessarily believe that it was necessarily in a form what you needed to do, but you're being asked by the president to do it. Now, you say you spoke to the relevant person, because you are not the president, you don't speak to the premier. You are a minister, you speak to the MEC of Finance. So you go to the MEC and say, MEC, I'm instructed to give you a paper. Here is a paper. Give me another paper, which is an enabler for you to spend. And I think, to me, it is the right way to do things. Now, the slide 9 of your presentation, and which to me says, firstly, it just declares that this 1 billion rand is there. Now, if we say there is a need of more than that, which I agree with the Honorable Gigawa, if we say there is a need of more than 1 billion, what will mitigate that need when we did not spend that 1 billion rand? Because we must first spend the 1 billion. And in the presentation, she says, once you spend 80% or more of the money given to you, they release the remaining money. Now, slide 9 says, though we have got that 1 billion, but the ball figure there is 5.2 billion rand, which is made to be accessible. 674 million rand thus far, 4 months down the line, Mama Lisuma, has just 674 million is spent. There is still 4.5 billion that can be spent if you spend and request, spend and request. You can go up to 5.2 billion rand that you can spend. Now, I do not subscribe to the view that if the municipality in Tsomo is not spending, the official of the department must go and sit there and help that municipality.
Why not Bushbuck Ridge? Tsomo? Now, why?
So you want me to defend?
No, this time it's almost. Now, or in Pet Sonervater in Northern Cape. So if they do not spend, remember these people are given mandate to spend. They are elected, they are appointed, they are elected, they are professionals in their own right. And a local municipality is not a branch of national government. It's a sphere of government. If you are a sphere of government, it means you are independent, interdependent. You can stand and you can't be sued and you can sue on your own right because you are a body in your own self. Now, to sit in a meeting and say, no, minister, just go and take over the municipality because they can't spend, it is not acceptable. And we must not create it because it is nice today. The other day, there will be no elections of municipalities and provincial government because the minister can umbrellally just jump into them. Though, I do think that, having appreciated all these things, Minister, if the donkey does not want water and the water is in the dam, sometimes take the donkey to the dam. But don't just go to the dam, just take it to the dam. Because indeed, we are in a disaster. We were in KZN. We have seen the pain of people of KZN. I mean, I did ask the old man the other day there that his wife is there, his kids are there. Privately, it is not working. It's just not working. So we really do need, as a bigger just government, to try and facilitate a process that is so smooth and efficient and that the people are getting relief. But one must appreciate that. Today, we have got a general sense that there is money that needs to be tapped. We must hump on people that must tap. I was celebrating earlier on when it was said water and sanitation, because I'm the chairperson of water and sanitation, responded 1 week after the disaster. But in the final details of it, I was just communicating with my DG that if we have been given 2 million rand, we only spent 744,000. Why is that? Why did we spend 700 and something thousand when we are given 2 billion rand? I mean 2 million rand. I think we need to take that responsibility also as implementing department, because if in KZN we have seen people drinking water from the dams, not dams, but from the ponds, because there was no water. Now there is 2 million rand given to us we can't spend, and I'm just ramping on this one because it is the department I am chairing. All other departments of roads and so forth and so on. So, but we must appreciate the work given to us, the information given. It is empowering. We can talk from information and sense. Thank you, Comrade Baba Knox.
Thank you. Honorable Mangu.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Lisa Manu.
Oh, my name is Robert Mashiko.
Okay, my name is Lisa Manu, member of the National Assembly, and thank you so much, Co-Chair. Greetings to you, Minister, and the officials. I think when you said you want to deal with facts and figures, I saw it in the presentation. I say it in other words, that was kort and bondag. Precies, yeah. Now, Honorable Mashiko, the minister can take the donkey to the dam, but he won't be able to make it to drink. That's the disadvantage. Okay. Now, straight to the point, the immediate relief, which is what exactly happened, and I think has been clearly articulated here. My question is straightforward. Does it have a limited time? Because there's another phase, I think, Minister, is a recovery thereafter. And I think there's a third one, which I don't even think we are there yet. But the monies we are talking about in the main were monies that were supposed to be tapped in that immediate relief phase. So the question again is there a limited period? Because we can't be in immediate relief forever. And if there is a period, what would happen then and so forth? And I think it will assist us, because people might keep on wanting to hold you on that immediate relief, and yet its time has passed. That's the first question. The second one is not a question, but a request and maybe a proposal, Minister. In the same way that we regulated prices during COVID-19 to say you will not pay more than X amount for a mask, for instance, can we suggest that your department considers that the example of TRUs colleagues have mentioned, and it's a very sore point because you are unable to stretch the rand if other people are paying more for exactly the same glorified check, called TRU, because that is what it is. Is it possible that the department can put a cap on the money there so that you are able to control? That, as I say, is just a proposal. There could be other funds, but the TRU is sticking up like a very, very sore thumb wherever we've gone. Now, if I go to the slide, I just don't know the number, but it's headed Funds Made Available for Disaster Response. You detail human settlements and the provinces, as my other colleague said. Again, my interest a bit biased there because I serve in transport. There is nothing that is appearing under Eastern Cape of both the Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant and the Provincial Roads from Equitable Share. Is it a reporting issue or is there reporting behind? And one of the things that came out from a transport presentation are two. One, Sanral says they spend a lot of money in the Eastern Cape and they have taken from their money and so forth. Would that money have been accounted for somewhere here, or would it be treated in a different way? And secondly, still on that roads issue, is that the Eastern Cape, it is still not clear to me, as even we sit here, they had made an application for a moving forward or reshifting, whatever the right word, of their provincial roads maintenance grant. But it's quite encouraging that KZN moved so much in terms of money and so forth. So the question would be, is there maybe an explanation? If not here, maybe it would assist us so that when we do interact with them again, we are able to deal with this thing specifically. Now, there was a mention of the closing date that has been shifted of applications or motivation for unforeseeable expenditure, unforeseeable and unavoidable, that has been shifted from the 10th, the closing date. And again, this question I would link to what I've said earlier. Where would that money have been accounted for? Under the immediate relief phase, or is it a different phase? And I think that is just really for educational purposes. If I go to the slide where you deal with municipalities, it's headed Municipal Spending. It lists the municipalities there and the amounts that they spent. Again, my interest there goes back to the Eastern Cape. When we were there, Minister, we were told that the municipality had spent, if I'm correct, around, let me not give figures, I might exaggerate, but they had spent some money of where they had to do other things to fix the disaster that they had. And yet here, I don't see any amount of money that would be accounted for in the Eastern Cape, particularly Port St. John's. Is there an explanation? Or any other thing, it's not listed in this list. So, and I think that will be all for me from this presentation. But I think it's specific, it really assists. And lastly, I think to the co-chairs, my suggestion is that maybe should we interact with other departments again in the future, could we request the minister to have people from Treasury to sit in the meeting with us so that some things we can deal with there and then. We are not able to be going backwards and forwards because I find this information very, very useful. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Thank you. Honorable Mukalipi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, co-chairs. I'm still continuing being treated as a stepchild in this committee. As you can see, there's nothing that identify myself. You were complaining about this too. You are doing the very same thing.
Can you officially introduce yourself?
My name is Honorable Mkalipi, a member of this committee in good standing, Minister. No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think most of the colleagues have covered me in what issues pertaining your department. But I must remind them that when last time we met here, you were not available and you sent the minister in the presidency, Minister Ngungubel. And some of these members there, I don't want to point them. They said after the presentation, others they want to go and take disprin because they felt sick. Today we are here, they are singing. And then one of the member, just when I was always a bouncer, and one of your member here, when you enter in this room, he was greeting you saying, GS, how are you, GS? Not as a minister. So now, we are 4 months in this thing called a national disaster. And then you are telling us that before the money click on the bank, and thanks God, the money is on the bank according to you, not under the mattress. But now our worry here, including these members now who are saying they're thankful because the report is clear, is bringing hope, of which the national chairperson here was very correct to say that is not well and good. We can't be saying there is hope at the end because people are still staying on the shelters 4 months down the line. So I'm saying to you, Minister, as much as you are telling us the story about the president who called you, and then when the president called you, the money was start to move to the bank. I'm saying to you, as being called GS, it means that you were once an activist before you joined the government. Being a minister of finance, now, the other minister who was here representing you was saying to this committee, he does not want to believe, because we are frustrated, all of us here, saying that if Treasury is telling us that the 1 billion that was announced is nowhere to be found. Last time we have premiers and everyone under one roof, and they were also frustrated in terms of that 1 billion rand, that now we are saying no, it's there on the account. My point is that you, as a minister, as an activist, as a people, as a person who also feel the same as we are feeling as activists while seeing people after 4 months. Now we're supposed to wrap everything in terms of the national disaster which took place in April within 6 months. I'm asking your department, what is the plan to ensure after 6 months, those people, what is your plan to ensure those people are out and get decent housing? Even here, I see that the money that is allocated for housing, informal settlement, and so on, but the popular view here in terms of the presentation, even from human settlement, is not about building proper houses for those people. We are still speaking about temporal housing shelters, of which is not a solution. So when as a minister who's supposed to ensure at the end of the day, the money that you're allocating to these departments who's supposed to go and service these people, how are you going to ensure that money is being used for proper housing which is the dignity of a black child. That is one thing. The second thing, if I can also engage the presentation that was done here, as much as the national chair raised that issue in terms of Northwest, but the presentation here, Minister, clearly stipulates that even the money that is allocated from your department, there's nothing about Northwest, not even a single cent. Not even a single cent, according to the presentation now. So I don't know if it's a kind of a mistake, or Northwest is also being treated as a stepchildren, like myself in this committee, because Northwest was affected. Even this committee visited Northwest, they saw the situation of the people are living under. But there's nothing that has been allocated to Northwest by your department. I just want to believe that is a kind of a mistake, Minister. Please clarify that thing. Thank you very much.
So that I can't be distorted, when we heard something coming from this side that, no, we love you, stepchild, it's Honorable Frolik. I like you, I love Mama. That should be very clear. I like you, I love Mama.
And I still love you.
No, there is no stepchild, Honorable Minister. It's one of our own, and every time when he's here, he deliberately decided to raise his hand to be the last one, and that is why I started with Honorable Mente, to create impression that is a stepchild. Is treated like any other, and the valuable contribution of this committee since we have started. And sometimes you might not even see, in terms of political affiliation, the manner in which we work and we deal with the plight of the people, of which that's the very positive that is coming out of this committee. Let me allow you, Honorable Minister, with your team to deal with the questions. Honorable Minister.
Yeah, no, Honorable Chairpersons, let me just say, what Honorable Mangwa said reminds me probably sequencing would have been an important one if we started with this presentation and our colleagues come behind. I mean, that sequencing would probably would have helped. I take your view, I don't know, that one of the honorable members said when there's a future presentations, we should make sure that treasury officials and ourselves are here. That's the point, we take that. Honorable Mente, sifuna ke nimnike umyalezo ngesixhosa. And lo myalezo uthi andinguye uYesu. Andizufela izono zabanye abantu. Wena ufuna ngoku ndifele izono zabanye abantu. Let me just say, I mean, more important point. There's something we need to change about our parliamentary processes and how we hold people to account. I think we accept that you've got every right as parliament to hold us into account. Let me just say, I mean, in the next week or so, I'm going to another committee where I'm going to be asked about the underspending. But the underspenders are not being asked to come to the meeting to account for underspending. You see my problem? So I'm going to be asked, I'm going to that, not today, I'm saying to another committee next week. I must answer why other departments have underspent. I think instead of saying, here's a Section 32 report, which shows who has spent what, who has not to underspent. Here's a Section 32 report. So that people must go and ask the departments, explain to us on the national departments what accounts for the 17 billion. I'm using this thing to illustrate the point I'm coming to now. They're functional departments, or what is, we've referred to them here as transferring departments. When a grant is called a human settlement grant, it means the transferring department is human settlement. What that means, human settlement is going to make sure that the TRUs are available for at an immediate interest. I'm going to come back to Honorable Kalpa's point later. At an emergency level, relief level, Human settlement is making sure that there are TRUs. Water and service and has got to make sure that the water tanks, all of those things are available. And that's why they asked 65 million, is to reprioritize from their budget to make sure that these water tanks are available with immediate effect. Now, I'm going to come back to the monitoring and evaluation, but the primary responsibility to do that is the relevant transferring department. So, to make sure that the TROs are available, to make sure that water tanks are available. Also on the pricing, I wouldn't, as National Treasurer, I'm going to come back what is system we've put into place now to keep in check that. But ordinarily, it's supposed to be the procuring or the transferring department that checks that. There's a question which says, asked by a number of honorable members, a number of them, including Mr. Honorable Mangu, that will there be sufficient funds for repair and recover on what is called unforeseeable and unavoidable? I can make the view that there will be sufficient funds. The government will do two things, or three, or four. We just go to this thing. The first thing government could do is to say, how much do we have in the contingency reserve in order to find unforeseen and unavoidable? That's one thing we could do. The other thing we could do is to say, is there sufficient funds available from the rollover funds? Second point we could do. Third issue we could do, government borrows every day. If we're to bump by, if you look at our debt to GDP ratio, borrowing to fund these things would not make a dent. It's too small to that debt to GDP ratio. So, funds will be made available for the unavoidable and unforeseen, provided they meet the test. Provided they meet the test. Now, because there's a tendency in government departments to say whenever there's a gap to ask for extra funding, people pile up and put for extra funding, even things that do not meet the request for unforeseen and unavailable. Is there space? Will we cope with another disaster? From a finance perspective, yes. But what we need to do is the point I've raised earlier on, that what is going to be necessary is we've got to go back to the drawing boards and say, how do we manage in future our disaster processes? Now, Honorable Gigaba raises the point that is there a problem? Is the problem capacity or not? It's a fundamental problem in the government system across all levels. It's a fundamental system across all levels. That's why people here are saying, are taking a solution which I think, in my view, is a shortcut, which says, if they can't do it, why can't we go and do it for them? It doesn't work that way. We've got to solve the problem, which is a capacity problem, so that we don't have this problem of people, but we should have done it. there's a process we've set up, and we'll come to how the funds are going to be accounted for. But when people find what are going to be used for, people submit a paper. This paper must not only be saying, I want R1 billion. This paper must say, I want money to build TRUs, and the estimated cost of the TRUs is X. We don't raise the money that says, okay, I want to buy TRUs. They must say, I want to build TRUs, the estimated cost for TRUs are X. And we got money. So we have an idea what the money is going to be used for in that sense. Ulrike, you will answer this SMME stuff. I'm not familiar with it. As I've indicated, Honorable Director, it raised this issue of the prices of TRUs. The only thing I can say, I can make an undertaking to investigate this issue. And if the committee requires me to come back, I can make an undertaking to come back and investigate this issue. There's the issue of poor spatial planning. I'm going to deal with it when I deal with the other question. There's a question I want to relate to this issue. I must admit, Honorable Rasool, we assist people if they ask for assistance. But what we do not do is to request for prioritization we do. Now, deal with the issue of accountability. One of the processes we set in motion on this process, which at some point you may have to ask the AG to come. We have asked the Auditor General, in order, taking into account the experience of the PPEs during the COVID, that they must do what, probably I use my own word, I don't know what they use, but live audits. In other words, as Department Procure, Auditor General is following them. They're generating a report which will tell all of us what is happening. Ulrike, you must refer to this water affairs which is not reflected. Honorable Mashiko is correct that the disaster fund, as they are placed in the Division of Revenue Act, are not referring to any specific province. They are disaster funds available to the tune of 1 billion. Everybody can claim on that. If that money is finished, we'll have to see what we do as National Treasurer to continue to help. I didn't write a paper to myself. I'm saying that's what the president requested. I decided to do something by contacting the MEC. Our officials met, and we sorted the matter quite easily. It is true that people have got to start spending money. We've set a timeline and said, if you finish 80% of what we've given you, come back. We're not saying that's enough. Finish the 80% first and come back. The third issue you've got to deal with, this is the third one, Ulrike, is do we have a limited time frame for the immediate relief? The regulation of prices for TRUs, I indicated that I didn't know that there's such a discrepancy. We will investigate that and look at that possibility. Let me just say what possibility we're looking now, which I'm saying is another possibility we can look. For instance, depending on each province, the price of a classroom is different. What we're beginning to do is to develop a standardized price for a classroom. And people may have to explain, moving forward, may have to explain why do we deviate from that price. So it might be important to look at this issue of TRUs moving forward. You know, let me take with Eastern Cape in broad terms. Eastern Cape has gotten a contract with Sanral to do their roads. What that means, if Sanral has spent money on that in their roads and Eastern Cape has not claimed yet, it could be that Eastern Cape has not claimed yet, because I see, for instance, even on their municipalities, a lot of the Eastern Cape municipalities will be finalized today. I know that because they submitted their claims late, but I know they're on the list that's going to be finalized today. Honorable Mkalepi, I'm an activist, as you say. I have been, and I continue to be. And I'm not necessarily happy with the pace at which this matter has been handled. As an activist, I don't want to be, you know, we have got some conscience as well. If I watched people on TV and said, we're still like this and so on, so I ask myself, why are we not moving with speed? I'm like you. The second issue is, which we are raising and which I concur with, is the issue, how do we make sure that we can develop proper housing for those people? Now, is it a money issue or something else? I can tell you now, if there's a plan, either by the municipality or by everybody else, that says, here's the housing we want to build here, this is how much it's going to cost. There's no reason why funds should not be made available if the people who were affected fall within the category that qualifies for a government support. That should not be a problem. Now, I'm raising this issue because, again, our space is to provide money, allocate money, not that is ours, it's allocate money. We normally, then treasury officials, we are notorious for saying no. We start at saying no. You must take us from no to somewhere. If you've got a treasury that does not say that, you must know that you don't have a good, even your treasurer in your own party, if that's somebody who's generous about money, you won't have money like all of ourselves. So, treasury officials, that's our mindset. We've got to say no. You've got to take us from no by substantiating your claim. Right? So, sometimes people think that we're anti-development. We are. it may well be that you are presenting a claim whose developmental impact is not impressive. So, let me just say, Honorable Chair, I'm happy with the proceedings, and I'm thankful to the members in the manner in which we've conducted this debate. I must say, I don't expect when I come to the committee for people to say, yeah, you're a nice guy, and that's what we say. No, it's in the nature of the thing for people to say, for holding me accountable, we must not smile every time, we must just rep me, so I've got to take those into account. The reason I came personal is for the same reason you're talking about. I said, I must have disappointed them. I don't want even to talk on that screen and come and see you. Because I told I was overseas, Minister Kungubele was acting Minister of Finance. So, and I'm told you were screaming, you were baying for my blood. So I decided to come. Ulrike, can you handle those three issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Maybe there's one more issue, Minister, that we also have to clarify, is just on the Northwest. So let me start on the top with the Department of Small Business Development. So as I had explained, the grants that we had on the votes of the Department of Cooperative Governance and on the Department of Human Settlements budget deals with, it's conditional grants to provinces and municipalities. The request, unfortunately, from the Department of Small Business Development does not meet the requirements of those grants, which is why when they wrote to the NDMC, it was rejected. But that doesn't close the door, because the other door is the door that is currently open around the unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure. And we do expect that the department then submits the additional that they were not able to find within the baseline. So the 60 million that they found within the baseline, anything over and above that was not appropriated to them for this financial year would then have to come through that process. The issue on water and sanitation, so maybe it's not very clear in the table, but the Department of Water and Sanitation has a conditional grant called the Water Services Infrastructure Grant, which provides for kind of interim services for water where there isn't water. So that's the purpose of the grant is that it provides rudimentary services. It will do boreholes and temporary fixes in a way that when you have to come with a permanent fix, we have that on the table. So and that is fundamentally a capital grant. So we received 2 applications from the Department of Water and Sanitation. And this is in relation to the indirect component of the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. So this is where the department implements on behalf of a municipality. The first was a 65 million rand, quite early on in the process, for 3 municipalities in the Western in KZN to provide interim water tankering services for a period of 90 days. They had a contract, they went out on an emergency procurement contract, and that is ongoing. The second was to do in the Eastern Cape, I think, and that's 2 municipalities to provide water tankering services also for 90 days. And I think this links quite nicely into the question that Honorable Manglu had around the timeframes and what is really immediate relief versus what is rehabilitation. So in the Division of Revenue Act, we say it's 100 days from the time of the disaster. But as we can see in the Department of Water and Sanitation, their immediate response would be 90 days. So we do have a hard time limit on what it means for what is immediate response versus what is rehabilitation. The technical definition, which is what the engineers tell us, I like to tell the Minister of Finance that I'm just a budget analyst. But the engineers tell us that what you do in an immediate response situation is you provide some functionality so that you are able to, so for example, on a road or a bridge, so that you're able to access communities. It might not be a full repair. The full repair comes later. Now, that also takes time, which is maybe why I think it was Honorable Direko who asked the question about the difference between the orders and the spending and all of that, because some of this, you order it, it takes time to build, I hope yesterday Transnet showed you some of the work that they were doing means that they will only get to full functionality in April next year. On the dashboard that I'd shown earlier, you'd be able to see if you go on the website, Sandra would say that some of the work, they'll only make first payment in November because the work that needs to be undertaken until then. So we're not always very worried about the difference between what is ordered that we're seeing on the system versus what is being paid, because you pay once the service is delivered, once the structures have been complete and all of that. It's very rare, and the Auditor General even kind of looks down on kind of the prepayments that are then made around all of this. So we're not yet worried about some parts of that. Where we are worried would, for example, be when the Department of Human Settlements transferred 700 million rand out of the Human Settlements Development Grant to KZN, or that when we had approved 350 million rand or 325 million rand of the emergency housing grant to construct 4,500 TRUs. And one of the criteria there would be the timeframes that needs to be done in to meet so that the money, because if we don't do that, I suppose then it becomes irregular expenditure. So, and then we don't see the money being spent fast enough. I think on Monday, the Department of Human Settlements said the province spent 36 million rand of the 140 million rand that was transferred in relation to the TRUs and the approval around all of that. So even though 350 million rand has been approved, only 140 million rand has been transferred. Once we get to that 80% of that 140 million rand, the balance will then be transferred. The Minister of Finance spoke about the accountability and the responsibilities and where that lies across the value chain. Then on the Northwest, unfortunately, Honorable Mkalipi, it's not a mistake. But two possible scenarios could exist here. So the first would be that we just haven't received a report from, say, for example, the National Department of Human Settlements in the same way that we had received from the National Department of Transport around the reprioritization of the Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant. And that is because the Informal Settlements Upgrading Partnership Grant that the Northwest Province would get an allocation for, and the Human Settlements Development Grant that they would get an allocation for, would provide for any kind of relief that needs to happen in terms of the conditions and the criteria set within those allocations. So that's the one thing. And all that it means is that they have reprioritized and they just haven't told anybody. And as I has explained earlier on, there are some things that the Treasury has authority to decide on, and there are some things that the accounting officer has the authority to decide on. So like with the equitable share allocations, and like with the Provincial Road Maintenance Grant allocations, they don't need Treasury approval to make those shifts. So it might just mean that, like I'd said, that this is maybe just a case of underreporting too. But we are happy to follow that up both with the Provincial Treasury and the National Department of Human Settlements. Thank you, Honourable Chairs.
Thank you.
Can I just add one point? There was an issue of deadlines which was raised for the unforeseeable and unavoidable. The rationale for a deadline is that once they are submitted, we'll have to evaluate them, whether indeed they meet the criteria for unforeseeable and unavoidable. That's the first process. The second process, we're going to take them to a Treasury Committee, which is chaired by the President. The Treasury Committee then approves that. After the approval, then we generate the adjustment appropriation bill, which will table on the 26th of October during the medium-term budget policy statement. I just want to outline that process, that we've got those deadlines. On the 26th of October, we're tabling the medium-term budget policy statement, and together with the adjustment estimate bill, appropriation adjustment, whatever. Yeah, I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Minister.
Not
Colleagues, let us not forget that part of the plan before the end of this month, we have arranged that we'll be having an interaction with the AG. It will assist in dealing with some of the questions, but what is coming out very clear in this engagement, colleagues and Honorable Minister and your team, is that the issue of having that person that will be coming from your department, that will be part of our briefings from time to time, so that is assisting. The second one is that we decided right from the word go that in dealing with these provinces, we're not going to be engaging and leave them out. Even today, we extended the invitation to all of them. That is why Premier Mabuyane, it's on the virtual platform. They are part of the meeting so that they can assist as and when there are some clarifications that might be distorting the real situation on the ground. The third one, it's about the issue of developing systems, as you correctly indicated, Minister, and the lessons that we're learning. Whether it was a coincidence or it was by design, the two of us as co-chairs in Parliament, as you will know, that we are in charge of committees in both houses, both of us. So it means anything and everything that has to do with committees in Parliament, it has to pass to us. We have to sanction that committee to sit. So it means we have at some stage to address the critical issue that you are raising, that sometimes when you see that committees are working in silos and creating some unintended consequences, when you might be called to account where you are not supposed to, or sometimes where we can have all of the relevant stakeholders in one meeting so that it can assist and clarify issues. So it's an issue that we'll have to deal with it probably outside this meeting so that we assist. The last one, before I can give it to you to do your concluding remarks, it's the issue that has been raised by honorable members that as this committee, we are very clear about these fears of government. We understand them in terms of the constitution that the constitution is very clear that they are interdependent, interrelated, and distinctive in nature. And at some stage in our in-house, we have to deal with it. I remember when we invited a stakeholder in our training in Parliament to critique what Parliament is doing. That professor said, Honorable Mashiko, it's wrong for an MP to say, as a chairperson of committee, you say, my DG. It's a, the DG is the DG of the department. It's not the DG. So it's not the DG of the chair. So once you say, now I'm talking to my DG, then it means you can just change and be part of the department when it suits you, and then come back and be part of the legislature. So it's but the issue of training for us, so that it's an ongoing process, and I can confess, Minister, that what come out very clearly, that is why Honorable Mokalipi is not wrong, and Honorable Frolik probably summarized it when he was doing the opening. Interaction sometimes on a virtual platform. When we engage you, first interaction when we installed Cape on the virtual platform, and it was immediately after I went to KZN and we installed Cape, we got a sense that the minister is not in the same page with us. Is he aware about this dire situation? But today, I got a sense that your understanding of the situation and the lesson that you are giving, and even clarifying what was not even clarified, and you are not even represented properly when you are not here. And now because we are here. So it's always good that when we call ministers, well, I normally say, we can't be praising a fish for swimming. When we call a department, we expect a political principal. If it's not here, it must be a DM. And even if we are raising challenges, we are robust in an engagement, but there's a decorum, there's a respect. We don't undermine or insult each other, and we get out happy. And that's the spirit and the nature of our engagement. I think we have to keep that spirit up. I will give it to you, Honorable Minister, to do your concluding remarks. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, honorable chairs. Let me just assure my two honorable members that I undertake to investigate the Northwest issue and report back to the committee, even if in the...
Give them special treatment.
No, no, no. No, when I'm okay, let me say, let me make an undertaking to the committee. So that I should not be dragged into the sibling rivalry. So I undertake chairperson to come back and even if in the form of a written statement by after investigation, what is happening and where are we? I think that's a legitimate request. We also undertake to assist this committee in whatever manner in generating accurate information. If it means getting some treasury officials to be here every time, that's fine. I think if you ask me, I'm happy with your decision to set up the committee and check in the light of what happened during the COVID-19 with funds. To me, it makes sense that you've got to make sure that the accountability for public funds and transparency it becomes the norm. Also, the level of debate and spirit is highly appreciated. I mean, this argument is gone, but if we're trying to win each other, raise argument, and win each other in a cogent manner, that's the spirit in which we should conduct these discussions. And I'm happy, Honorable Chair, and I agree with you. These virtual meetings sometimes we just talk past each other. And I think it's also a lesson as well I've learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and your team. Colleagues, Honorable Minister, all of you now, we're going to be having the 15 minutes break, having tea. And, well, we can start today if it's possible to do the arrangement, Honorable Minister, to have somebody that can be part of us throughout the day, because we're still having two presentations. I can see the DG in the presidency, it's here, and we'll be having a cocktail also here doing presentation. So it will be good to have that person, but we'll release you and the others. Thank you. Let's have tea, 15 minutes. We're back at 20 past.
presentation from the presidency as tabled. Is the Deputy Minister now online? Good morning, Honorable Deputy
Yes,
Minister.
Chair, I'm online. Yes, I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but you're not very clear. The sound is not good. Can we just attend to that matter?
Okay, I'm
Okay,
sitting in one place and there's,
Good morning, Honorable Deputy
my
Minister.
network is. Morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Honorable Deputy Minister. We were told,
Oh, okay.
We were told that the Minister is not available, but you will join us. I see you have joined us virtually. You would have
Yes, it's true. No, thank you.
Yes, we would have
And once again,
we would have appreciated it if you were physically here with us, because we in Johannesburg.
let me apologize for that. I was assigned to come at a later stage. I had intended to also go to the presidential Limbizo. Then when I got there, I was advised that it's better if I come and attend. I would have came in person. I apologize for that.
Yes. You may proceed,
We
Honorable
will
Deputy
correct that.
Minister.
with- Can I continue, Chair?
Please proceed.
No, good morning to yourself and good morning to members of the committee, and also good morning to ministers and deputy ministers who are in the meeting and colleagues from various departments. I see on the program it's COGSTA, Treasury, and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, and premiers from various provinces who are also part of the meeting. Chair and members of the ad hoc committee, on the 23rd of May 2022, the ad hoc joint committee on the flood disaster relief and recovery requested the DPME to work with COGSTA in developing a matrix of interventions and
Honorable Deputy Minister.
measurable targets which will enable.
Honorable Deputy Minister, is it possible to switch on your video, please? We'd like to see you. And this meeting is also it's also being broadcast
Yes,
on
it's
different
possible.
platforms. So if you can kindly switch on your video, please.
Yeah, is it fine?
We can't see you yet.
Is it okay?
We can't see you yet.
I've switched it on.
Yes.
I have switched it on, Chair.
There you are.
All
Thank
right.
you. And you look beautiful this morning.
Okay.
You may now continue.
Okay, no, thank you. So as I was indicating that on the 23rd of March, the Hardcore Joint Committee on Floods and Disaster Relief and Recovery requested the Department of Planning and Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, together with COGSTA, to develop a matrix of interventions and measures with targets which will enable government to monitor progress on the flood disaster interventions and also to communicate the progress with the affected communities. The presentation which we are presenting today will provide a matrix of key indicators for monitoring flood disaster interventions, which is used by the department. The matrix, Chair, has identified 12 areas of interventions and has got roughly around 45 indicators which are used to monitor outputs and outcomes of the interventions. Now, what are some of the outputs which we will be looking into, which we'll be presenting? It's humanitarian relief, human settlement and housing, schools, health facilities, electricity infrastructure, water and sanitation, landfill sites, roads and bridges, rail infrastructure, DPWI public buildings, support for business planning and resource mobilization. The presentation, Chair, will be led by Dr. Robert Nguna, who's the DG in the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, and the Deputy Director General, Mr. Godfrey Mashamba, and they will go into details about it. Let me just highlight a few which I think you should then expect in the presentation. The matrix follows a result-based framework that was adopted by the National Joint Flood Coordination Committee as an approach for organizing the interventions. This is then will go into how they were able to report, how we can continue to report using the matrix, This approach helps us to focus on attention on the ultimate end game. Now, what do we mean by the ultimate end game? The extent to which things have been restored back to normality, and also on how far we are doing towards various areas where damages have been done. Now, with regard to how far with the damages, just a few is that one, we're going to look into, we'll report on whether the report will display the floods and if people are back into their homes, whether households are relocated from flood lines to new areas, whether learners are back to regular schooling, whether roads have been open for traffic, whether trains and moving vehicles and goods are commuting as normal, back to normal, whether households and businesses are getting relief, are getting reliable water and electricity supply, whether businesses are back to full operations, and finally, whether jobs are saved. So then the department, they will expand it in detail. In all of this, we should be monitoring the speed in which we are able to move as government, and DPME together with COXA providing that political leadership. The quantity of the interventions and the value of money, and we must also look into the effectiveness of addressing the most critical areas. We will also, in the presentation, refer to the Oversight Committee that is chaired by the Director General in the Presidency, Ms. Pindile Baleni, which has been established to ensure that the resource allocation for the flood disasters interventions are indeed used for the intended purpose. This is part of a responsibility of the Minister in the Presidency, Minister Ngungubele. Chair and members of the committee, government's response at this outset was swift in the deployment of search and rescue teams as and when the floods were happening, and in ensuring that the displaced families were provided with shelter at the mass care center within days after the floods. This intervention saved lives and also enabled families to find provision of shelter afforded to the displaced people safely. This also ensured that they are provided with essential feedbacks of information which was gathered by the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. Yeah, and you would remember that when the flood had just happened, 3 to 5 weeks of after the flood, there were positive strides which were able to reach in terms of identifying where the deceased, if they were, and assisting them to bury and so on. Now, the other issue, this also assisted us in relation to being able to accommodate them in your temporary shelters. The other issue is that they will also venture into the overall DPME's assessment of what do we think about the whole situation, and that what we are saying as DPM is that we are not where we are supposed to be in implementing the disaster relief measures, particularly at the level of human settlement, social development, and spatial and land development. Why are we saying that? They will expand on that. This is because the key concern that has emerged from about 2 months of the disaster was that there is a slow pace of providing temporary residential units, what we call your TRUs. Just so you noted in the presentation, I know that I'm going to touch on it again. So, and that the provision of support for households to repair their homes, this was quite at a slow pace. This has prolonged the stay at the mass care center. Ideally, we're supposed to have already relocated them, and has already brought about a sense of other social problems at where they are still staying now. KZN, for instance, has targeted to provide 1,810 temporary residential units by the end of June. But to date, we're about halfway towards that target. Only 827 completed and 760 handed to families for occupation. The other issue which we'll touch on, the frontline visit by the department has conducted indicators that there are too many dependents. They are in the domain of land development planning, especially given the roles of multiple institutions, both at national and local level, which need better coordination or strengthening going forward. As we are busy constructing the temporary residential units, the TRUs, we should also be working on an exit plan from the very same TRUs to get people back to their homes or finding permanent solution for resettlement. What is encouraging is that in Northwest, for example, you'd remember that we are giving a holistic report about the floods and the matrix, so we're not necessarily going to be concentrating on KZN only. In Northwest, it was reported that all the 800 people that were displaced by floods have now been relocated back to their homes on a longer term, but however, we need a longer term solution within that respective human settlement element. We also need to address the issue of water supply, sanitation, health facilities. The DPME is making a follow-up of a monitoring visit in the Northwest to check the progress on the 18th of August 2022, which is around next week. There is a clear need for a continued social development intervention, in particular the psychosocial services and provision of food. This is needed in all affected provinces, and even more seriously needed in places where current projects, where families are going to need the help, especially those who are still staying in mud care centers. And this supply of this food supply should run until December 2022. The collaboration between the Northwest Department of Basic Education, Social Development has also assisted in placing the already children who were not necessarily in school, and also supporting the psychosocial support, which must also be continue, which we need to also continue, and you need resources as well to ensure that it continues. Progress thus far in the repair of infrastructure around the Port of Durban is encouraging. Also in this case, the swift response of phase 1 intervention was also very good. Let me give you an example. Opening of one lane on both sides and clearing of the vehicles on the other side enabled continued flow of goods while further repairs were being carried out. Now, in relation to phase 2, also in the Port of Durban, interventions were completed in a shorter time than initially anticipated, and by now, 3 lanes on both sides have been opened. This is important. This is an important progress given the need to go back to normality and taking our people back, and the economy to continue to run on an active and normal basis. Chair, there is a need to address information gaps with respect to assessment of damaged and cost of repairs, as well as targets and time frames for specific intervention areas that are highlighted in the DPME presentation. Such information is crucial for setting the baseline against which the metrics should be monitored. We must also be able to carry out reporting, which must also be at a level of consistency in terms of data coverage and monitoring systems, which are still underway with the support of Infrastructure South Africa and the CSIR. The information available to the DPME indicates that scales of the damage far exceeds the resource available within the coffers of government. Various sectors are exploring a range of models to fund recovery process, including a reprioritization, government disaster relief fund, insurance claims, donor funding, etc. All of these are meant to then come and meet government halfway, because as I indicated, the expectation in the coffers of government will not be enough. It may be appropriate that for this point and for consideration, we consolidate the information for funding application so that we can be able to garner other financial support, which might hamper us from being able to do what we want to do as government, of course, with DPME, being able to centralize the data and inform us what is it that needs to be done and providing the clarity. Lastly, Chair, in relation to communication, a multimedia communication campaign across the 3 spheres of government is in place and has since been in place, and it has been able to profile what is happening, the outpouring. It has also been able to take our people into confidence in relation to what is it that we're doing, but also it has also been able to touch other external donors to come and be able to respond and come and want to contribute to assisting our people so that life can go into basic, into normality as we would want to be. But also in relation to this, it also has opened up a platform for South Africans to start communicating and teaching each other about human settlement, climate change, to also just educate our people about how to take care of the environment better so that we can have better future planning of unplanned disasters and in case of disasters, which also gives an opportunity for DPME to come up with some form of framework which we must be able to use for future to be able to know how we're going to deal with disasters. Now, what does it mean? Arising from this meeting, it will be appropriate to arrange a direct engagement with affected communities in all the provinces and the business sector, so we are able to continue to interact with our people beyond what we have been doing using other platforms. And then later on, it will also give us a particular platform for them to be able to also raise their concern so that we are not seen to be trying to assist them from afar. So for example, here we can discuss also as recommendations from the committee, how you think that beyond the media platforms that we've been using, how then do we go and we engage with our people? For example, as I was making the presentation, I indicated that because of the prolonged stays in these centers, other social ills are emerging, which are also going to cause a problem for us as government. And the sooner we move in relation to assisting our people, the better. I'm going to ask the DG, Dr. Nguna, to then take us through the presentation, and then he will allow the team members to then expand in relation to the presentation. Just that those are just the highlights. Like I indicated, we have worked mainly to focus on the metrics because that was what you had requested us to do when we had met on the 23rd of May 2022. Thank you. Over to you, DG.
No, thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. I will now request the DG to make his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, co-chairs. Good morning to you and to honorable members, DM and other colleagues who are part of this conversation. The DM has already covered us in terms of the introduction, so I will not say much except to hand over the opportunity to go straight to the presentation. Now, Chair, we are aware of the time that has been allocated to us, so we'll be expedient to make sure that we finish on time to allow for further interaction and engagement with yourselves. So over to you, DDG. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, Honorable Chair, honorable members, and colleagues connected online. To extend on the input that the DPME has already given, our details of the presentation, which is going to cover the following areas that the Deputy Minister has outlined. There is a whole lot of slides that cover each of the intervention areas. We will go through them in summary noting that the presentation that DPME does actually has coherence with the work that's going to be presented by COCTA, given that the two departments work together on these particular issues. The purpose of the presentation is to outline the metrics of indicators for monitoring the disaster interventions that the DPME utilizes. It is attached in the annexure to the presentation. We have included it, I think it's about four last slides of the presentation. We use that set of indicators to make an assessment of where we are in terms of this disaster interventions, but also we go further to outline the key decision points. We highlight areas that require action or decisions immediately in order to accelerate or make corrective or adaptive measures along the way of implementation. I've already indicated that DPME provides the required support to the National Disaster Management Center on the overall effort. Hence, our presentation will have coherence. The DPME role, to remind honorable members, in this process is based on its mandate, which is around planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Captured, reinterpreted at the bottom of the screen to indicate that DPME provides relevant support and guidance across government on matters relating to planning, monitoring, and evaluation. We'll indicate in the next slides how that has been done. While DPME does that, it also maintains an independent posture wherein it can undertake any work in those spaces of work independently in order to provide insights and generate evidence to inform decisions. But DPME also, based on its positioning at the center of government, provides executive oversight, support through the minister in the presidency. This picture summarizes the broad approach followed in this particular assessment that we're presenting today, that at the top of the screen, we outline key elements of what we call the results chain approach that the Deputy Minister has outlined, that we want to look across the whole value chain of what do we put in as the inputs, resources that are being put in, respond to the disaster. We also outline a key set of activities, actions that are implemented for the intervention, as well as the outputs. What do we get out of all these things that we are implementing? Are we getting the results? And whether there are sustainable results that we get out of this that the DM has already outlined. But we frame all these things in terms of the three phases that the President has announced of the immediate humanitarian relief, the stabilization and recovery, and also rehabilitation, which then looks not only at the short term, but the long term. And in doing so, there is a whole mechanism, machinery of how these things are done. We'll demonstrate with frontline visits that the department does, that we can go out and identify challenges or areas of blockages, and then use that information to establish what are the facts, what are the driving factors, or the problem areas that need to be corrected, and then we intervene by mobilizing relevant support and relevant intervention measures. But then we go back later to check if things have been done to close the space. So each of those roles are demonstrated in these slides, which just gives examples of what DPME actually did. I won't go through all of them, but just to highlight that there were oversight monitoring visits that were conducted at the level of the minister, at the level of the DG, also DMs have actually visited provinces. The Deputy Minister Kekana was in Northwest. DPME has led a visit on the TRUs in the KZN. The Minister was also in KZN, I think in 3 weeks, within 3 weeks of the disaster, to set up a mechanism for monitoring together with the province. So there is a range of things that the DPME does, which I would take it that honorable members have been able to read some of these details. And the mechanism for escalating the findings that whenever there are findings on the ground, they are communicated to the relevant structures or responsible department, and a discussion is entered into about how such issues can be resolved. So whenever we can present to committees like this, you would find that either we have discussed the issue with the department or we're still going to discuss it with the relevant department for resolution. And there are several reports that have been produced based on the work that has been done on the site. Now to go to the assessment of progress, which touches on the following areas that, under each of the areas that we've outlined in the beginning, key intervention areas, there are activities that are identified, there are specific outputs, they are also based on information that has been accessed. We profile what has been accessed. There's a detailed document behind this. What appears in the presentation is a summarized version. So, and also key distinct points of things that are highlighted, challenges or things that require actions. So in the space of mobilizing resources, we focused on about 6 things. The first one was to make sure that, to check if assessments of the damages have been completed and the costing of damages have been verified. There are still challenges in that space that, yes, assessment and verification have been done. Sectors were not moving at the same speed. We've heard earlier that the water sector has actually moved very fast and then made a submission for funding. But then, as we checked by the 31st of July, there were still certain outstanding verifications that needed to be done in the spaces of health. It could be a question of information has not reached us, or indeed the verifications are still underway, because there are certain places where sectors have reported that they have done certain verifications, but others are still remaining. For example, we've heard yesterday from the transport area. So in that space, we call upon the relevant institutions to finalize consultations, especially the infrastructure ones, around the responsibilities for repairs of infrastructure, given that, especially in the South Durban area, that these responsibilities are shared, of pieces of infrastructure in that space are shared amongst various actors. So there's a lot of coordination work that's needed. There is progress in that space, but certain work need to be completed. Then in the integration of disaster responses into an annual performance plan, that's another work that DPME does, that through a circular, DPME guided, and also through consultations with provinces, provided guidance to national departments and also provinces on how that can be done. There's still remaining work that provinces need to document some of these plans. Not everything would appear in APPs. There are items that appear in operational plans. Then also the work on fast-tracking the automation of reporting systems is still underway. The big area of utilization of allocated fund, I think there was a detailed discussion with the Treasurer giving updates in terms of the funds. The data that's presented here, I would maybe say that the committee should rather refer to data presented by Treasury because it's the most up-to-date. What is here is at the point in time, 31st of July, rather. But here we are recommending as DPME that all provinces, because there's this information in the public domain about whether provinces are able to access the funding, that we are calling upon all the provinces through their prof joints to consolidate information about their funding applications that they've done to date and indicate any outstanding funding applications that they still have to do so that there is a common understanding together with the Treasurer about where things are and clarity in that regard. And the contribution of non-government sector, that's where the donor funds are reported. KZN has a best practice there that they've adopted guidelines for administering these donations, which they are using. And then in-kind support, we haven't seen the same with other provinces, that we are encouraged to do the same, that so that we have clarity around donor funding and how they are distributed to make it easy to track when we evaluate later on. We also note that at the onset of the flood, capacity has been mobilized from across government system, concentrating a lot more in the KZN because that's where the major disaster happened, and the speed with which these institutions have responded need to be commended, where a total of 6,048 people in the security search and rescue operations were made available, but also the deployment of capacity for engineering and technical support within the first 2 weeks, which is outlined in that slide, which then brings us to this kind of recommendation that there is a case for review of the current setup of the model or of the disaster management system, that some of these institutions that we see listed here have demonstrated their capacity and readiness to support and respond to disaster situations like we have now. But their roles are not so clearly articulated in the way the legislation has been written now. So there's a case there for the review of the disaster management legislation to make it easy and to have these institutions to readily and proactively engage when there's disasters in the future. This is the slide that shows the assessment of damages in homes. Okay. We have put up this slide to indicate a case of information gaps that we still note, but in some areas where there's no data, it would then mean that there was no disaster. But if, for example, the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape and the Northwest, if we have things wrong, we would call upon those provinces to produce relevant data that can then be considered if we are to have an overall and coherent view of the scale of the damages. In this area of immediate responses, there are, with the data taken as read, that there are still issues that the committee need to note, that in KZN there are still numbers of persons that are still missing, and the 17 bodies that still need to be traced back to their families. There is still that process that need closer attention and finality as to what is the way forward. Also, the issue in the KZN which arises in terms of the controversies regarding the bureau assistance, there's need for clarity around the information in that regard. But also we note that there are 18 Eastern Cape residents that Eastern Cape reports that could be included in the numbers that are reported in KZN. So there's a need for clarification of those figures as to what are the incidents of fatalities in the affecting Eastern Cape, to just improve their understanding in terms of those numbers. Then the next issue is around the humanitarian support. This is an area that has received a lot of, we want to highlight this as a critical area. The provision of immediate humanitarian support in terms of here is home affairs. These are home affairs things of replacing IDs, emergency water supplies, and relevant departments would respond, will report about these things. I wanted to highlight the issue of human settlement. We are still coming to that. Then there is an issue of Northwest, which DPME is going to be visiting again next week to follow up on the issues that have been discussed. That what we note in the Northwest is that the 800 people that were evacuated during the floods and put in the 3 mass care centers have now gone back to their homes, and the school attendance in the Dilpan area is back to normal, according to what's reported, with all learners accounted for. But there's a need here to continue with the psychosocial support, and then there is collaboration between the Department of Education there and the Department of Social Development. They have identified the numbers that they need to take to assist with that kind of assistance. But also, work is underway on the road infrastructure repairs, which has been reported by the Department of Transport yesterday. And there is challenges to highlight there is that of sanitation, that they have run out of funds from what they report, that they are using OPEX, operational expenditure, to fund these interventions. They still need for finality around the issue of funding for the disaster. So that area, we recommend that the Northwest Province and DMC and the National Treasury must consult to address the specific challenges of the funding. It doesn't come out very strongly in the report, clearly in the reports that they provide, but it's something that DPME in its visit can also clarify. There is a need for social political facilitation, given the issue of relocation, that we would have seen in this slide the area that has been flooded and the area that has been identified as a potential space for relocation, that there is a whole lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions, or things that need to be clarified around the long-term solution on settlement, human settlement. There's also a challenge of okay, I've already highlighted the issue of 50 additional toilets needed, but that is a short-term solution. A longer-term solution is actually needed. In the space of human settlement, we highlight this as an area that requires utmost attention, and it will be useful for human settlement departments at various levels, and the supporting departments like, for example, social development and the land DALRAT to cohere on what needs to be the next set of actions. challenges are well known, they've been articulated, we've been listening to various discussions, they've been well articulated. One does not have to repeat what is in the slides, but we must actually also highlight that three districts actually in KZN have actually reached their targets for provision of TRUs, but what is not so clear yet is whether by having achieved the targets for building the TRUs, the people that were displaced, all of them have been catered for. So that is the thing that still needs clarity. That is a point to highlight. But also that the thinking needs to shift to look beyond the TRUs, provision of TRUs, that we should start now 4 months down the line, be looking at how do we go to permanent solutions. That's why we are talking about the exit plans from the temporary, the mass care centers. While they are still necessary and need to be maintained for as long as they are needed, but there needs to be clear exit plans that can be easily articulated with the building of TRUs, and also another alternative channel, which is the provision of support to households to repair their homes. There's limited information around that space as to what kind of support are households getting, which helps them to not to go to TRUs, but to go back to their homes as a way of restoring permanent solutions there. There is a study that was done by United Nations Children's Fund, which we found to be very useful, and we made sure that it led by Department of Social Development with the DPME's area of social cohesion and social protection. We made sure that these findings of this study are escalated, and would still encourage that if opportunities exist, that the committee be provided with this report. We actually noted the DG Social Development highlighting that recommendations from this study need to lead to some improvement plan that can be implemented immediately, because we're dealing with mass care centers now to deal with the whole range of social challenges that have been identified through this study. It's a very useful, it gives one insight of what is actually taking place, and it corroborates the findings that the DPME has had from this, but also beyond the current situation. It does highlight things that need attention going forward in terms of dealing with some of the social issues arising from there. It argues very strongly about the continuation of the social, psychosocial support. Here, we have, we are trying to highlight here that some of the solutions that we've seen on the ground is the DBSA providing the 200 replacement houses, which are permanent structures. In addition to what the government is doing, DBSA has come on board in the KZN, and they've provided this, plus also water solutions and other things, which then helps to remove the pressure away from the relevant departments there because of these type of donations and contributions. The visit that the DG DPME had led, together with the Department of Human Settlement to KZN, and also a follow-up study that DPME did in the TRUs, does lift up some of the critical challenges that can help us improve the way the TRUs are actually implemented, and findings of that have been shared with relevant structures so that they are incorporated in how they adapt the plans to improve things. Some of the key ideas which we recommend the relevant parties, either KZN or the Department of Human Settlement to update on, is the issue around whether private sector be requested, can provide land, can make land available for this. We have had today the UNDP is on the news. UNDP is actually providing support in this regard. They are willing to assist government to provide guarantees. The other thing here is that communities that are adjacent to places that have been identified for TRUs are opposing the construction of TRUs because they are not sure. They don't trust that whether government is going to phase out these TRUs in a short space of time, reasonable time. So government need to provide stronger guarantees in that regard. The option of constructing TRUs in people's original homes, which I think has been taken up by some of the municipalities. But as long as it's not taking people back to where there is flood risk areas. I won't go through the details of this slide, but safe to say that the schools damaged in total, 418 between KZN and also Eastern Cape. We don't have data on Northwest and Northern Cape. They are categorized in terms of the intervention according to certain categories. There are schools that have minimal damages, which would be repaired immediately. And then there's good progress in that regard. There are those that are category B, which require a certain amount, between 150 and 500,000 to fix. And then the category C, which require much more longer term. Okay, there's a mistake there on the over 500,000. There's extra zeros there. Apologies for that. So within 3 weeks, deep cleaning has been done in about 274 of those schools that I highlighted. And then those did not need any major repairs, and then learners were able to go back to school in KZN. And there were mobile classrooms that have been provided. On the category Bs, we hear that there is procurement. The update we have is that procurement is still taking place on some of these, and then they've been going through real-time audits for those to be done. Procurement also for Eastern Cape, latest update, 8 June, indicated that procurement for various categories were still at various stages of progress. And then with the health sector, there is a number of facilities affected. That's provided there on the screen. Also in the Eastern Cape, about 47 health facilities in the Eastern Cape affected. Here in the health sector, the work is being done by of repairing of buildings is by DPWI. The issue that has been highlighted by DPME here is that the critical issue that needs to be solved between the water sector and the health sector, that there are health facilities that are still dependent on water tankers. So DPME has recommended to the province that the two sectors need to meet so that there is clarity about what are those facilities and what is the plan of restoring water provision to those which have time frames. And on the electricity sector, there is a good progress in terms of connection, restoring electricity supply, but there are reports still indicate that there is certain pieces of equipment that need to be installed to ensure that there is stability and also going forward to alleviate further risks going forward. In the affected businesses, the data that's here would recommend the committee to refer to new data that was provided by Small Business Department yesterday in terms of the uptake. Same we would say with the DTIC because information that's here is as at 15th of July. safe to say that these programs are running, and the support that's provided by small business and DTIC and IDC also covers the area of agriculture and also tourism facilities. I will then skip those slides of tourism, and in the tourism space, the message that we get there is that this assessment that have been done indicate that the same damages that happen to infrastructure does affect tourism, but the fixing of those facilities like roads, access roads and things would help to get tourism back to recover. But we also know that there are already major events in tourism that attract a lot of tourism in the Durban area or KZN area that have taken place already, which shows that things are actually moving. We won't repeat that slide. And then the landfill sites, there's no specific recommendation here. And then on the telecoms, the key issue there is around vandalism of infrastructure, which is a big concern that whereas the telecoms companies are actually repairing their infrastructure, there's still a problem there of vandalism, which needs law enforcement authorities to attend to. On the bridges and roads, tourism, Transport has actually given an update yesterday, so the information that they have given, we would recommend the committee refers to that, because the information we have here is at 15th of July. So also on the rail infrastructure. And then the last slide would be on the environmental space, that we need to highlight here a positive thing that has happened with the environment authorization, that the Department of Forestry Environment has actually fast-tracked their processes by making sure that they issue verbal permission or authorizations so that other processes can move, and then they follow up with written confirmations of several infrastructure projects that actually been enabling in that space. Maybe to conclude also that the uptake of solutions for sustainability consideration, Department of Science and Innovation has publicized what is called a Green Book, and then the CSIR is assisting there, that several of the infrastructure projects that are being reconstructed, some of them require redesign that takes into account long-term consideration for sustainability. So they're incorporating these things into their design, including also in the water sector. So those are important considerations going forward. Now to conclude, Chair, is that DPME wants to emphasize that there must be, while activities and processes are important, we would like to start now, 4 months later, because 4 months later we expect that certain results have been achieved, that we should shift our focus more to the results as to what have we actually, where are we in terms of resolving these challenges, but also take the lessons to review the capacity of the state for disaster management. And the resolution pays specific attention to resolving the issues that cut across sectors and spheres of government, that those issues tend to be the ones that cause the most delays. And also a consolidation of the funding information applications, that needs to be clarified. The issue around the missing persons and the bodies that have not yet been identified, the exit plans, the issues around challenges relating to allocation of land and TRUs for relocation need to be to be attended to. With that, we would conclude this presentation, and the DG, I will hand over back to the DG to conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, DDG. Honorable members, just to close, I think this being a presentation, we did not go into details on our assessment of the capacity of the state, which we think is a very big issue. I take it that it may come up in the questions, so we should be able to deal with that. But I think at some point, we will have to come back to the committee to talk specifically about our own assessment of the capacity of the state. The other issue that we did not discuss in detail in our presentation is that of special development, in that most of the problems that we have encountered arise because of the way people are settled. There are still many people who are settled along the flat lines in the 3 provinces and in the other provinces. So there is a very big issue to talk about related to spatial transformation. And lastly, one thing that we're trying to do as a DPME, working with the Disaster Management Center and DCOG, is a decision matrix, so that when we come back to you next time, is to be very specific on who is supposed to take what decision, and also report whether those who are supposed to take decisions do really take decisions at a time when they are supposed to do so. So I'm just flagging these issues because they are likely to arise out of the discussion. They are important issues, but in a short presentation, we didn't go into details. So on that note, Chair, we are ready to take questions and engage in a conversation with honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, DM and your team. Colleagues, let's engage. Start from Honorable Mangulu, number 1, Mashiko, number 2, Mama, number 3, 4, 5, 6. Honorable Mangu? 7.
Thank you, Chair. And, good afternoon. My name is Lisa Mangu, once more. DM, my first question really is a question that might be consistent along my questions. It would have been nice if I had an answer, but I know the structure doesn't allow us to get that one-on-one. Along the way here, on recommendations, it's not clear to me what exactly is, to whom is DPME recommending to? Because if you say recommended for this and this, to whom? Who must take that decision? You know, it's like, it's like I'm looking at a presentation from an institution like CSIR or somebody outside who's not in government. And that's just an overarching comment, stroke question that I think could assist. But to be more specific, if we go to DPME, and it might come out, all what I'm saying with that preamble is that in slide number 9, the heading there is planning and mobilization of resources. And in particular, I'm concentrating to the clause which says, number 1, finalized is the output, finalized assessment of costing of damages. And you go right across to key decision points, recommended actions. Relevant institutions to apply, to finalize consultations on assignment of responsibility to repair of various infrastructure and related facilities. It goes on and lists them. I don't know how that is helpful to me, really sitting there to say, and then what? Has that assessment been done? Or is the role of the department just to bring that information and just throw it to us? And again, maybe my frustration will come out as I go on. I just felt frustrated during the presentation. Maybe unfairly so, I wouldn't know. slide number 10, you then say there is a contribution of non-government sources, which the DDG spoke about. It says then KZN has adopted guidelines. Now the other provinces have not. Who must do what for them to adopt those guidelines? Who? You know, so that is that question I was asking at the beginning, that says so. Because I would think that we are sitting at government, this is a disaster, and there should be like sort of a militaristic approach on certain things, especially when there is no money here. We are talking about just accepting guidelines. There is no money needed. The guidelines are there, they are useful. However, although yesterday it would appear that there was accountability of this, it's good to hear that KZN has adopted that, because that's where most of the concerns were. Now, if we go to slide number 13, and slide number 13, its heading is assessment of damages to homes. The paragraph there gives us numbers, and it tells us that what has been affected here are 4 provinces. Yes, but when we talk to the detail below there, it talks about 2 provinces. I don't know where are the other 2 provinces. It specifically talks to Eastern Cape and KZN. And although it talks about 4 provinces, but the narrative above there talks only about 3 provinces. So I don't know where is the 4th province there. Although the DDG in his presentation, I think at some point he does mention Northern Cape to a point, but one is not picking up information on the Northern Cape there. So the question there, once more again, is where are the other 2 provinces? The Northwest that is listed there, why are there no figures there to assist us? I don't want to agree with my colleagues across from me that maybe Northwest is treated as a stepchild. Slide number 14, we talk there about, again, the DDG speaks about these bodies towards the end of the presentation. And again, 4 months later, government, you want to tell me we could not pick up DNA or any other forensic techniques to link these 17 bodies? Till when are we going to be told that 17 bodies are still not being identified by their people? And again, this thing comes out to say, and then what? Because KZN would have told us that, social development would have told us that, DPME is telling us that. The question is, then what? Then what? Or is the role of DPME? Hence I said maybe that's what I'm missing, is just to tell us those figures and leave it at that. And I think this is what will be frustrating people when they listen to us. And say they have been telling us this for so long, then what? What must we do about it? Slide number 17, DDG mentions it, that 50 toilets are missing. 50 really? 50 additional toilets. Obviously, I think factually that is correct. And again, you don't get that strong recommendation as to what should be happening. Now, Chair, I want to go to slide 35, where the DDG there talks about environmental, that department, that he said it's a good news to tell. When we were in the Eastern Cape, Port St. John's was telling us that they can't treat a certain area where there is some natural vegetation there because they've been fined before and they don't want to be fined by the same department we are told today is doing a good job. Could we ask for assistance or intervention? They might not have those details with them now, that the Port St. John's issue as it relates to environment, please be looked into, because it's very critically in an area where should another high volume rains fall, it's likely to cause exactly the same thing again. Chair, I think on slide 33, the DDG did say would rather rely on the information that came from DOT yesterday, so I will not raise the issue. Lastly, slide 27, where there is an interaction there with the KZN business sector. A couple of issues are raised at two levels. They meet the minister also. Of interest to me is the last bullet there, which says that the large manufacturing plants, highly automated 2 to 3 months, resume operations, Toyota and all those things. I just wanted to know the issues that are being raised here. Are they just for information purposes so that we understand what is there, or at least that is my assumption? And real last now, Chair, is that bullet of observations and recommendations. Could I recommend to the department through you, chairs and DPM, that Deputy Minister, sorry, DM, not DPM, that maybe the recommendations, some of them one can pick up that we could take them from here as this ad hoc when we wrap up our work and package them in certain portfolio committees to continue monitoring. But there are things that I think need to be tightened up when we make these observations and recommendations. Emphasis must shift more towards tracking of the results of interventions, taking lessons and reviewing capacity of the state of disaster that the DDG spoke a lot about. So others, I think they just need some tightening without trying to read all of them. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mashiko.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Robert Mashiko. I am a member of this committee. No, I don't have to be a member in good standing. Somebody's fighting to be in good standing when she knows she's not. so I don't, you are not in good standing.
Honorable Mashiko.
You are a stepchild. Official, you are. You are an adopted kid. Chair, thanks. On a serious note, I think when we started earlier, in our initial presentation by DPME, I did ask this question, and I was answered in a manner that says, please don't say that. Whether is DPME an accounting department to this committee? And if so, then this question comes. Because to me, I take that the DPME it's an internal mechanism for cabinet to monitor and evaluate its work and therefore recommend to themselves how to resolve issues that they have find to be problematic. Because as you're saying, if DPME might see a work that is supposed to be done and recommend, it recommend to another department. And we are not a department. If they report to us that it might be an issue of paisa ukuthi no ngibonile ngiye recommend water. Mina, I have seen it, but because I can't resolve, I have recommended to water. If you want an answer, ask water. So, do we really need to have that presentation of that sort, where answers or commitment or accountability does not start and end there? And I'm not necessarily saying it is a bad thing to have a monitoring and evaluation committee, but I'm saying the home, for instance, in the treasury, they were consistent to say the implementing department. I'm sure they have got the name was not necessarily implementing what was called something, but it was meaning the implementing department. it's better if the implementing department come and account and then say to ourselves, I have found this, and this is what we think that lacks, and this is what we are going to do. So DPME is dialogue masisters zabalaza bekuna lento kuthiwa uzinquma amakhanda uziyeke zingafanga kodwa uyaziphihle nje but mawuhamba zingavuka le ziphinde zihambe futhi. So to me, I really believe that we need to, when we call department, it should be department that we believe we can hold accountable and responsible. I do not believe that we will have a hold on whether the DPME have seen that which they are saying, and if they have seen what then. And I think to me, I really find that, for instance, this issue of Northwest, and now it's coming back into that Northern Cape issue, the Northwest. We have been told that the people of Northwest who were displaced have been relocated back into their areas. Now and then, it comes back. What is the official position? Do we still people who were affected by floods in the Northwest? If we do, what are the status? Because, and I've heard when Honorable Mentos was asking the Minister of Finance why are we not having the Northwest report? Because I understood that, to me it was simplistic, that we did not have it because the people of Northwest were affected. They were very minimal and they are back into their houses, therefore there is no longer a need. But it is coming up here. But when you look into what is expected as the output, there is nothing. So does it mean step-shared, or does it mean that the matter has been resolved? If so, let's state it clearly, that tomorrow we must not consistently be asked the question about the Northwest issue. I haven't heard anything that is being said, what the specific area in the 4th province we're talking about, which is Northern Cape. If there is, it was not part of what we were supposed to talk about. How does it come into being that it is now added here? I thought that there was an apology by an official of the department, that it was a mistake that she mentioned Northern Cape. Northern Cape is not part of this, but it is here now. So let's get an official. And I think it might be wrong that we're getting it from the DPME. We're supposed to get it from the accounting department, but DPME is talking about it. Let's hear it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mama.
The competition of who loves better.
Thank you very much, co-chairs, for the opportunity. I'm Lindwe Pipi, member of this committee. DPME, in your monitoring and evaluation of department projects related to infrastructure, has the department ever requested disaster impact assessment reports? Why I'm saying this, as a disaster impact assessment is a methodology to assess development projects from the viewpoint of disaster risk reduction by identifying improvement points of the project. And also, Chairperson, and I'm wondering if this should not be a mandatory legislated obligation on all new developments. That's my first question. My second question, Chairperson, will be on page 6 of your presentation, the department claims that it dependently undertook monitoring and evaluation activities. Now, could these detailed reports, findings, be made available to the committee so that we can see really that the committee has worked on those activities? Thank you very much, Chairperson. Those were my questions.
Thank you, Mama. Honorable Mente.
Thank you very much, Chair. A lot of concerns have been raised, but I just have one concern though. I don't get a sense that DPME is doing its own monitoring from its own office nationally. And if so, then the people that are doing the monitoring on their behalf are misleading them. Because their report that talks to what's on the ground, which we know, and what they say on the report, it's two different things. Coming back to what I think it was Mashiho, that is there a status that we have for Northwest? Or is the Northwest matter closed? Or there is a status that you can talk to about the Northwest, other than telling us that no, there is no report, we'll go visit it. Northwest people in Zwaying, there were households which were submerged in water completely. Is your office aware of that? When you say everyone has gone back home, I think your imagination should start by asking yourselves, those homes that were completely submerged in water, how are people there inside right now? Because that water hasn't gone anywhere. I was just talking to our councillors there now. That water is still there. So how is it that everyone has gone back home in Northwest? It's not true. And then number two, the issue of the water tankers, and which has gone, on my notes I've made, I don't know, this comrade of mine here is writing in every book. The stepchild here is taking every book. There was an interesting figure which we were given by a treasurer, that 75 million was allocated to water tankers. And that was allocated on the basis that it's a 90-day provision. From the perspective of a monitoring and evaluation, already you should know 90 days, 75 million, simply for the provision of water tankering, something is wrong.
It is not even provided now.
So you can see your office is not doing monitoring. Someone is just telling you, okay, we're here, we're there. And there is no action from your office. There's no initiative of, we've been pushing that these people that are here, we have monitored, now we have satisfied ourselves that this which is on paper as needs by the people, by these different spheres, is a true reflection of what the people actually need. And therefore, let's take it and juxtapose it to what the national office in terms of finance is providing, and see if this goes to the needs. It's not, comrades. I don't know how, but my interest is your office is not doing monitoring. It's being fed what is supposedly a monitoring. Those questions that Babu Mangu was asking, they're legitimate, but your office is not aware. There is no such, this report here is not what is on the ground. And this report is not your office report. It's someone else who's giving you the glossy pages of the magazine that's called a municipality or whoever is an implementing agent there. It's not your office. Can we get a report of monitoring? What have you monitored? From what the people need, what was provided for, what did they receive? This one is not your report. Thank you, Chair.
Next is Honorable Zandamela.
No, thanks, co-chairs, Sam Zandamela, the member of this committee. Just one question without repeating what has been asked. The colleagues have covered a lot of things, especially with regard to Northwest. I think the committee and the co-chairs must consider this thing and pay attention to the issues of Northwest, because it looks like there's serious problem. But one interesting question that I would like to ask the department in slide 26, and it's one of the issues that was raised earlier on. In the issue, you are saying the informal traders, there's a 10,000 kept per informal trader. And there's an issue that was raised earlier on. Now it's 4 months down the line, and on progress they are saying implementation process still unfolding. I think it's a serious concern because informal traders, they rely on selling. And if this process is still on implementation, I think there's a serious problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Zandamela. Honorable Mkhalipi.
The stepchild of the committee, thank you. No. I outule. Hey. No, thank you very much, coaches. I think I've been covered. I just wanted also to emphasize on the point of, because I wanted to get a clarity from the department, because your department is supposed to plan, monitor, and evaluate. Where do you start planning to monitor this disaster that took place in April? When now you plan on what? You plan on what other departments have told you. In terms of monitoring, I concur with colleagues that no, there's a lack of monitoring on your side. If I can make one example, I have been consistent with the issue of Butele as a family. I even raised it yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't know if you were also part and parcel of the meeting, to say that in Ward 57, we are at 59, Umama will know even the family has not or have not even getting that intervention from government. So if the department is good in monitoring to the T, you will know by then, would know this family have not received the intervention. Yesterday, the DG from the social development have committed himself to say he's going to make a follow-up on that one. I just spoken to a family now. And I'm happy because when we spoke with Umama about this family, you told me exactly what will happen. Exactly. The family is saying that the former premier who committed when we were here, he called the family and he said to the family, someone will call you. And one person called, I don't know from where, called the family and said that, no, I'm going to ensure that you get the money that you deserve because we lost 3 members of the family. After that, that same person called again and said, no, but there was someone claim on behalf of the family. And then they even gave them the details of a person who made the claim. When they make a follow-up, who claimed is the ward councillor, who came on the eve of the funeral. And the voicemail that is here, saying that even the councillor didn't even spend 10 minutes on the eve of the funeral. On the funeral day, the family called the ward council and said, please bring the water tankers, the one that it has costed how many millions?
75 million.
The councillor failed even to provide the poor family who have lost 3 members, the councillor who have claimed. The money was claimed by the councillor of the poor family. If you are monitoring, you could have known And that councillor could be in jail now. So I'm saying we are not monitoring anything, DG. And the second thing that I want to ask, at least you were here when we wanted to get a clarity in terms of Northwest. You were here when the minister and the department were saying that no, there is a lack of, from the departments in the Northwest. They are not saying what do they want. What are you monitoring as a department? If you can't monitor what needs to be done in Northwest. Because in your presentation, DDG, you are saying clearly they have challenges in terms of money, in terms of operation, what. But if you have monitored that they have not even talked to the National Treasurer as departments, you could have known if you are monitoring. No, I understand that it must be cleared to us what are you exactly doing as a department in terms of this disaster if you are doing the monitoring. Now, it's not your space. You are telling us in your presentation that in terms of land that needs to be identified for the people who have been who are supposed to get land to rebuild their houses, only 65 confirmed, and then 8 in process. I don't know what does that mean, but to me it's a disaster. Because out of KZN alone, people who have in need of places, could be those temporary shelters or their houses were washed away by floods, according to your report, is 1,810. But the land that has been identified, 65 confirmed. Okay, leave that, because you are going to tell me that no, we are monitoring when the department is supposed to give land, to identify land. Someone said at some point, no, we are engaging with the private sector. But I don't want to venture in that space because I don't see this happening. All right, I'm saying, if you are monitoring, can you just give us a breakdown of these people who have benefited so far? I'm still going to engage with the Department of Cocta when it's coming here. 1,810 people were in need of temporary units. How many have benefited? Because we are living with amongst the communities. We know for the fact that Emawote Ward 53, people have submitted a list about 300 to the department. None of them have benefited. So if there's someone who's monitoring the progress, at least okay, Emawote Ward 53, Ward 56, Ward 59, Ward 60, bangagaban. But now to come here and say, nisho nje total number, it does not help us. Ngoba sikusebenza nabantu la sihlala khona. I'm glad that in your presentation, because you are the only one so far who is also reminding us that there are still people who are missing, because that is the nature of South Africans. The Minister of Social Development yesterday said so yesterday as well. Ngesikhathi kusaqala ama-floods, many people coming up front wanted to assist, but when time goes on, ayabantu bayabaleka kusala department only. Nathi siyakhohlwa ukuthi kunemindeni who didn't find closure about their people who have been missing. Now, no one is talking about those people. If we are monitoring as a department, you could be saying no. Now it's obvious. Umndeni olahlekelwe ingane yawo eyifunda grade 10 whatever, ngeke isatholakala lo ngane. Is unfortunately hambili. But now, how do we assist lo mndeni ke to find closure, to close the page? Because I think ingane ngatholakala manje or lilunga lomndeni or whatsoever. But no one is talking about those things now. Sekuyinto ekufanele umndeni uyibonele. That's why I was raising the issue of social workers who are unemployed in KZN to assist in this regard, because families are still traumatized. Can you imagine you are losing a member of a family? You wake up in the morning, there's no likilunga lakho le family mashikho. And then now it's business as usual. No one is coming to you to say, let us go to Ngalendaba. Let us vala leli page. Government, the last point that I want to make, coaches, is the one when the Deputy Minister was talking on the platform. The issue of communication. That is very important. You know, now there's a gap between us as abantu abahlala eParliament to speak about this thing and the community. Ngake ngabona amashiho at some point amanye amadoda ayethu okwenza oversight eKZN ajahwa after amaland ama-floods. The committee said, no, what are you doing here? Babegqoke namasudu ke labo, co-chair. They were wearing suits, beya kwi-informal settlement, umphakathi wasemangweni not here. So now, abantu, the community does not know what is happening. I'm glad if the deputy minister is committing herself to say the department is going to ensure in terms of the communication, because there's a gap between what is happening with government, what is the reality on the community, on the society. People, they need to know, okay, sesila manje, what are the challenges and so on. But if there's no one who's coming to address them, akekho futhi owenze oversight again. Remember, it's not about this disaster that happened in April of floods. There's also other factors that we must take into consideration. The issue of unemployment, as I was alluding to that fact yesterday, to say that even social development is trying to go and give those people who are still on shelters. The community are hungry outside there. But no, we are going to benefit as well. But if there's no one from Hulman coming to talk to people and said, no, this is our plan, especially you who are saying we are planning and monitoring and evaluating a department, at least abantu baya understand that, okay, there is something that is being planned here. But if you are leaving the vacuum, so I will hold the deputy minister into accountable about those communication, especially the aspect of going to address the communities in terms of this disaster that happened in April 2022. Thank you very much, coaches.
Thank you, Honorable Kalipi. Honorable DM, DG, TDG, it's your turn.
I was the last.
Oh, sorry, Honorable Khai, I missed you. Sorry, Honorable Khai. You're the last one.
In any case, I was a bit reluctant to raise my hand. That's no wonder you missed. Was the reason I'm reluctant is that the point that was raised by Honorable Mashik, because when I went through the report yesterday and this morning, I was telling Honorable Man that the difficulty with making a monitoring government to give us a report when it is not responsible for implementation and service delivery. It's a bit of a, perhaps, I don't want to say waste of time. Because I was just thinking maybe in future we should just get reports from the department, not bringing them to come and respond. And then perhaps on regular basis, they give us the report that they get from all the departments that are concerned. And then our researchers can go through the reports and pick up issues, particularly around the recommendations that they're making, so that we then follow up with those departments, the implementing or departments that have mandates to implement whatever is picked up by the department, the PME. Because really there's nothing much that they have to do other than just to recommend. But also if you look at their report, some of the dates, even themselves in terms of the actual monitoring on the ground, if you were to ask when physically they went to Northwest, for example, the last meeting was that of Deputy Minister Kekan to Northwest, which was before we went to Northwest. After that, I heard the DDG was saying next week they will be visiting Northwest. Since May, there has been no actual visit. And in some of the slides, they talk about frontline visit to assess progress on the intervention and gather citizen feedback. There are no dates as to when this has happened. If you look at the presentation, most of the dates are in May. So since May, there's not really, you don't see any other dates since May in terms of what they have been doing in terms of real-time monitoring. I don't know, perhaps if it's a matter that we raised in COP when the minister went to answer questions. The issue of real-time monitoring and also digitalization of monitoring, so that on daily basis, you know what is happening with regard to the issues of TRUs, issues of water and sanitation, roads, bridges. On daily basis, you know what is happening with regard to those issues. But also on the issue that has just been raised by Honorable Mkhalip, the issue of the 84 missing persons. It's just stated in the presentation that there are 84 missing, but it doesn't say what is it that is being done. Have we given up on those 84 people, or are we still doing something to recover those people that are missing? But also, with regard to the issue of, I think there's a slide that talks about departments. There was a circular that was sent to departments to revise their APPs. 33 did not revise their APPs. Does it mean, therefore, they have not reprioritized their budgets? And also about some did not even respond, about 13 of them did not respond. What does that mean? Does it mean they have not reprioritized their budget? If they have reprioritized their budget, what does it mean then with regard to their plans? Does it mean also their plans have been revised, or they have not been revised? They only revised the budget. What will be the effect of the implementation of those plans if they are not revised, but yet the budget has been revised? So those kind of things, we need clarity with regard to those. But also in terms of the recommendation, the point that is raised by Honorable Manju, who are you recommending to? If you recommend it to a particular structure like the National Disaster Management Center, is there any update in terms of in terms of the implementation of those recommendations? How far are you with regard to that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me take the last one on the virtual platform. That will be Honorable Proudenseth. Honorable Proudenseth. Proudenseth, unmute yourself. He seems to be struggling. We can see that it's on the platform, but we can't hear anything. Let's allow the DM, DG, DDG to take us through the responses. DM and your team.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to members of the committee for engaging us and participating in the report. Let me agree with the last speaker in relation to who are we reporting to, and we don't want to come to the committee and play a defense role, because what our understanding is that at the end of the day, all of us must find lasting solution to help our people. And that maybe perhaps what we were supposed to have done was that, together with COCTA, as you had recommended, that we must go and form some form of a framework together. It would have been ideal for us to come and account to you collectively, so because your expectation is that you had advised that we must go and form one collective form of working together. And you will find that probably even in the reporting of COCTA, there might be other things which we have raised, they might also raise, so it might, in that regard, create some form of problem. Another member of the committee spoke about the question of accountability with regard to who then holds accountable to ensuring that these things happen. And our understanding is that as the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation correctly put as you have done it, we have got a responsibility to assist government in planning, whether short-term or long-term. In this regard, with regard to the floods, it remains our responsibility to ensure that we bring all stakeholders on board to ensure that we plan short-term and long-term around the disasters. Of course, in that planning, just like if you do your MTSF or any other issue, we would then look into assigning responsibilities to respective departments, because the actual end product and output lies with respective departments. And that is why, for example, and I'm going to request when my colleagues answer that, we must not try and want to defend. For example, if you're asking that somebody has been lost, they are not found, for example, whose responsibility is it? Is it the police? Then if we have got that coordinated reporting, we'll be able to say, no, we have identified that there's a person who has been missing. We have identified that a councillor has stolen money for 3 people in a funeral. It's a police matter, for example. How do we recoup the money so that we can give the family? And I think we still have got time to go and self-correct amongst ourselves to ensure that when we come with the reporting. And in my presentation, when I was speaking, there's a time where I was speaking about creating a system which must assist us to be seamless. We are in the process of creating that system. That system is going to assist us so that some of these questions that you are asking us, because we are reporting on issues, but the honest reality is that at the end of the day, if water has not been delivered, you are going to ask us because we are reporting about it, and it will look like we are not organized or we don't know what we are doing, if then we are not able to respond. But if we can go back to the same committee that you had advised us in May, that then let's work together, we can be able to correct moving forward. And I'm going to request that if you can allow us time to go back, finalize this seamless process that we say we want to reach. And also in the next meeting, if we can come collectively with COCTA, like you had indicated, to come and be able to report to the committee. Because I don't want to lie and say, on this one, this is the solution like you're asking. I don't think we've got the answers. Mara, the DG and your team, you're allowed to also can answer. But from where I'm standing, I don't think as a department, we can say, no, this one who stole, there was a police case which was open. This is where the issue is. This one who has not been found, there's a searching, a person missing, let's find out. So I'm going to request the DG, just so you answer on other issues. But I think even beyond this disaster situation that we're facing, you are also alerting us to some of the shortfalls which the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation finds themselves in. And others might have to propel, especially yourself, as ourselves collectively, to ensure that we even give DPME more power to be able to do other things. Because as much as we can go and then we find that there is this problem, it will still need somebody from another department as the end user to be able to do it. We can come to you and say, so many departments have reviewed their APPs to be able to accommodate. You will still ask us, what powers do you have to take those who have not reworked their APPs to respond to the flood? And you will find that we are going to clash in straws. But that one is a conversation for future to say, how do we then legislatively empower DPME so that in other shortfalls that we realize, we are able to be able to correct them. But I can safely tell you that with this disaster, we have committed that we also want to come with some form of a framework which must help us for future, so that if in future we have got disasters, we have got some working tool which we can be able to go to the shelves, refer to it and say, this is what is supposed to assist us. We have done it with COVID, for example, with the pandemic, that we must also be able, as a lesson, to produce something which must help us in future in case we come up with pandemics. That does not necessarily take away the fact that with the situation which is happening now, we should be able to respond. DG, let me allow you and the team to then engage on some of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, TM. TG, you'll focus on those issues that were not covered in TDG. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, we welcome this rejoinder by the committee. We see ourselves as DPME as a very important part of the work that we do, because we come here and highlight the kind of issues that need to be addressed. And I will appeal to members, having said what has been said, to still see DPME as that important department that on regular basis should provide certain information to the committee. Now, just very quickly, in disaster management, what happens is that there is a law that gives powers to the Minister of COGTA and the associated institutions in that space. So in my opening, I admitted that the way the disaster management system is configured in government needs to be reviewed, because once you have a department which carries certain legal mandate, then from a planning point of view, we've been grappling with this issue ourselves as to how then do we exercise our role vis-a-vis a department that has been given a particular mandate in terms of the law. So, Chair, I made a commitment that we want to come back to the committee or other committees to talk about our assessment of the disaster management system, because it needs to be reviewed to work better. Two, I made another commitment that we will submit a decision matrix that indicates, that responds to the question as to who is supposed to do what. Because this being a presentation, maybe, and looking at the time that was allocated to us, we did not go into details in quite a number of aspects, Chairperson. So we're still asking for that opportunity so that we then submit in a word form before the end of next week, indicating that this recommendation is directed to so-and-so. This is what so-and-so is expected to do. Now, there is a question as to how do we communicate our recommendations. There are structures that we have established in government, led by the Department of Cooperative Governance and the National Disaster Management Center. So through those structures, we do make these recommendations, and we will give the committee a breakdown of those aspects of work that we consider to be very pertinent and urgent, indicate who's supposed to do what and by when. So I wish to apologize that when we looked at the time that we've been allocated, honorable members, we debated amongst ourselves on the extent to which we need to go. And I really apologize for not having answered quite a number of issues. So, Chair, all the issues that have been raised, I'm looking at time now, and I will stand to be guided by you. We are willing, because we believe that DPME is very critical in the work of Parliament. So in writing, in a word format, to respond to all questions that honorable members have raised, and if we are required to come back on the issues that I've raised, particularly the disaster management system for South Africa, we will ask to present our own observations. In our submission, we indicate, for instance, there are institutions of government which have more capacity than even the NDMC. A case in point is the DBSA. But the role of DBSA is not mentioned in the disaster management system as it currently exists. CSIR plays a very big role, so we'll ask to come to Parliament with some details. So, Chair, with your permission, I'll ask that, because of time also, that we be allowed to give more concise, straight to the point, detail to honorable members, so that it can assist in the work that the Parliament is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Indeed, it's very true. Probably we'll take it to another level and even outside this, because the minister made that commitment about the issue of the matrix, because it was going to address a number of these issues. And the sooner we have that, the better for us, so that we are on the same page, and it will avoid some of the misalignment. And we are correct that we have to develop some systems that will make us that out of what we have experienced as a country, we have some better lessons. That detailed response in black and white that will be coming to the committee will assist us to make our own deliberation so that we can be able, when we come with a preliminary report, we cover as much ground as we possibly can. You are allowed to do that. Let me take this opportunity and invite you, DM, to do your concluding remarks. DM?
No, thank you, Chair. We'll definitely work on improving our reporting and come back to you as soon as possible to give you the report. We appreciate the engagements and the honest, robust engagement that you have put through. We have noted all the concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DM. Thank you, DDG. Colleagues, even yourself, DM, on the virtual platform, we are inviting you for lunch. So we'll be having lunch now, strictly, and our colleagues will come back at, no, even if we can make it less than, let's come back at 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. No, let's come back at 2 o'clock. That will make it possible. We'll, around 3:15, 3:20, we might be done with our next session. Let's go and enjoy the lunch. DDG, thank you very much.